Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. Welcome to your Tuesday. Thanks for joining us here on Tuesday, October 29th. It is right around 5 degrees. Our high today is going to be 9 and a mix of sun and cloud in our forecast. So far, so good, so early on the drive. So we're not popping on the air here and with any major issues on the morning commute. But just a reminder, you can reach us at any point in the morning at 788-3093. Let's say good morning to the team. May McKillop's directing the show today. Hi, May. May will also be on air covering that commute for us. Abby Adiyemi, good morning to you. Abby's behind the controls. Abby covers the forecasts on the show. And there is the magic hand waving hello, Kevin Nipatebo, who is our YouTube producer. We missed Kev's hello this morning. He'll wave at us later if you're watching there. Lots of ways to connect with us. Let's connect over. Though, as I mentioned, between now and then, how can we better protect women in our lives from violence? It's a question that a lot of people are asking after a university student at U of M was attacked while sleeping in her dorm. So we're going to take that conversation, and we'll also talk about the responsibilities for protection moving forward, and why often the discussions surround women taking responsibility. But what about all of us? Stay tuned.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Before her sudden death in 2023, Lisa Marie Presley was working on a memoir with the help of her daughter, Riley Keough. Riley will be here to talk about that memoir. It's called From Here to the Great Unknown, and about her mom's life growing up as the daughter of Elvis Presley.
Show my little daughter, Lisa. She's 6 years old. Look at her jump up.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The Saskatchewan Party has won its 5th straight majority.
Because you know and believe, as do I, that Saskatchewan's best days are still ahead of us, and you believe that the Saskatchewan Party is the best choice to lead Saskatchewan to that brighter future.
But it was a tight race. Scott Moe's Saskatchewan Party won 35 of the 61 seats in the legislature. Carla Beck and the NDP scooped up the rest, including Regina, and all but 2 seats in Saskatoon.
We might not have crossed the finish line first tonight, but my friends, we have changed the landscape in this province.
Beck and the NDP ran on a pledge to fix healthcare and education while pausing or slashing certain taxes. Moe also ran on broader tax relief, and he promised his first order of business would be to ban biological boys from using girls' change rooms at schools. We're waiting to hear from BC Premier David Eby a little later this morning. A final vote count shows his NDP has narrowly clung on to power in that province. Georgie Smythe has more.
It's been 9 days since the election and finally a result. Premier David Eby's NDP has edged away from razor-thin margins with John Rustad's Conservative Party and are poised to form a majority government pending the results of a judicial recount. In 2 ridings in the BC Interior and Lower Mainland. In those electorates, the difference between Conservative and NDP candidates is less than 40 votes.
It is unusual for a race to be this close in this many ways.
Stuart Prest is a lecturer in political science at the University of British Columbia. He says the Conservative surge in BC sends a strong message to the winning party.
Something is shifting in the province with regard to the electorate, and I think that in some ways is the most interesting piece of this puzzle.
Eby said in a statement late Monday that his party is listening to the message voters sent with this close election. Georgie Smythe, CBC News, Vancouver.
In exactly 1 week, Americans will be heading to the polls. One crucial block of voters, members of the Mormon Church. They typically lean conservative, but some Mormons say Donald Trump's character is turning them away. The CBC's Richard Madden has more from the church's base in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Mormon voters or LDS voters are the most likely to say they don't have a political home.
Speaking from campus in Provo, Utah, Brigham Young University sociologist Jacob Rue has studied Mormon voting patterns for decades and says the fast-growing denomination may be the last of the Christian right resistance in the era of Donald Trump.
LDS voters care deeply about the Constitution. They believe the Constitution was inspired of God. I believe, and I've argued and I've shown data, that January 6th is a breaking point for LDS voters.
He says Mormon voters value character and compassion and found Trump's MAGA brand has repelled roughly 12% of Mormon voters since 2016 and increasing ever since. A small but influential vote, he says, that helped swing Utah's neighboring battlegrounds of Arizona and Nevada to Democrats in 2020 by the slimmest of margins and could repeat in November. While the church strives to stay politically neutral to its 7 million members living in the U.S., both presidential campaigns are aggressively courting LDS voters to help tip the balance. Scott Watson is voting Democrat this time.
We should love everybody, and everybody should be loved and feel love instead of hatred.
Christine Forbes is staying with Trump.
I don't think that he does necessarily share all my values. I feel like he's a stronger leader.
Many here are watching the Mormon vote closely in an election that appears to be dividing the flock. Richard Madden, CBC News, Salt Lake City, Utah.
Once again, Justin Trudeau's government is facing a deadline from the opposition. The Bloc Québécois want 2 of its private members' bill to be passed by today. If that does not happen, Yves-François Blanchet has threatened to help topple the government. Janice McGregor is in our parliamentary bureau. And Janice, have we heard anything about a last-minute deal?
Marcia, in a word, no. Ever since the Bloc issued its ultimatum, Liberals have been assuring reporters that they're in talks to try to reach some kind of compromise, particularly on the Bloc's push to improve seniors' pensions. But barring some kind of 11th-hour drama, those talking points have not delivered results. And so we expect Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet to signal that his party is now no longer willing to prop up the government in future confidence votes. However, this is a bark without bite, at least in the short term, because the House of Commons remains bogged down with what's essentially a multi-week filibuster by the Conservatives. No government business can proceed, but no more opposition day motions can be introduced either. Plus, the Bloc's already had its slot to introduce a confidence motion earlier in the fall. It won't get another one until next winter. Conservatives, however, do have a motion on notice that would try for a third time to pull the plug on this parliament. Pierre Poilievre was out mocking the Bloc leader yesterday.
Blanchet has delivered nothing for Quebecers. So it's time for the Bloc to work for Quebecers rather than working for Trudeau. Vote for a carbon tax election.
And remember, it's not enough for 2 opposition parties to be working to bring the Liberal government down. The NDP, too, must turn on the Liberals. Leader Jagmeet Singh told reporters yesterday he's not afraid of an election, but his party's not looking for one either. Maybe just a matter of time, he said, as they keep taking it vote by vote.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. The U.S. and other allies of Israel are expressing concern about Israel's ban on UNRWA. Last night, the government moved to stop the UN's relief agency from working in Israel. The legislation takes effect in 3 months. Critics say it will have devastating consequences for Palestinians, especially those in Gaza. Sasha Petrusik has more from Jerusalem.
With 2 laws quickly passed, Israel's parliament, the Knesset, plans to effectively shut down the United Nations' main humanitarian effort for some 6 million Palestinians. In the occupied West Bank and annexed East Jerusalem, that means health and education services. but it's most critical in Gaza, where it's the backbone of all humanitarian efforts, even those delivered by other NGOs. Sam Rose is Senior Deputy Director of UNRWA in central Gaza.
We have a population here that's on its knees, going through absolutely untold misery and suffering. And the role that UNRWA is playing here is unprecedented.
Israel has long accused UNRWA of being infiltrated by the Hamas militant group. Lawmaker Sharon Haskell.
Hamas has taken over United Nations facility, schools, hospital clinics, and headquarters in order to use them as military bases to hide ammunition, to hide rockets.
Israel has implicated several UNRWA staff out of a total of 13,000 workers for involvement in last October's attack. UNRWA denies allowing Hamas to use its facilities and says it purges the organization of all suspected militants. Washington says UNRWA's irreplaceable role is all that prevents widespread starvation. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
There are more calls for change. Following a CBC News investigation into Rogers TV price increases, 1 week after our Go Public team highlighted customer concerns, the NDP wants the telecom giant to reverse those price hikes or face consequences. Erica Johnson has this update.
Will the Liberals have the courage to do it? Yes or no?
NDP MP Brian Massey rises in question period, calls on the Liberals to tell telco giant Rogers to roll back a recent TV price hike or be banned from bidding on future government contracts.
We don't believe that they should be rewarded anymore.
For more than a week, Rogers customers have been reaching out to Go Public, saying they feel misled after signing 2-year contracts they thought guaranteed a monthly price, only to see their bills go up, most recently by an increase to TV box rentals. 81-year-old Roger Burrows of Cultus Lake, BC.
They're devious. They tell you one thing and do another.
Language in Rogers contracts allows the company to up the price of things like rental equipment while customers are locked in. Contract law expert Marina Pavlovich.
These contracts are very long, difficult to understand, and they're generally unfair to consumers.
A spokesperson for the industry minister dismissed the call to shut Rogers out of federal contracts, saying they expect Rogers to clearly communicate contract terms and pricing changes to its customers. A Rogers spokesperson didn't address this latest pressure to reverse the price hike, saying most customers aren't affected, but wouldn't say how many are.
I would like to move a motion.
Meantime, members of the Parliamentary Committee on Industry and Technology have unanimously agreed to ask the CEO of Rogers to make an appearance to answer growing consumer discontent. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app, on YouTube, as we click through the month of October. Tuesday, October 29th. This hour on the program, you might recall that earlier this month they announced some new ways to reduce food waste in Winnipeg specifically. There's going to be these new depots. Actually, they've just opened. We're going to look this morning at a new report that's come out across the country from Second Harvest. It reveals that billions of dollars worth of food in Canada is being wasted each and every year. So we're going to hear more about the bigger picture. Also, this hour on Information Radio, Ryan Tumult, he's going to join us, parliamentary reporter for the National Post. We talked to him many Tuesdays about what's happening in Ottawa, and as you just heard on World Report, a lot to talk about today with that deadline looming for the Liberals to respond to the Bloc Québécois, so stay tuned. But we sure hope you stay with us for 5-10 minutes more. We have a beautiful story to start the show today. Just a beautiful local story, and so I'll tell you all about it in a moment. But right now, let's go to Heather Wells for headlines.
Good morning. Well, the opposition Tories say a bill aimed at curbing machete sales doesn't go far enough. The NDP government tabled a bill earlier this month after a number of violent attacks. If passed, it would restrict the sale of machetes and other long-bladed weapons to people over the age of 18 and would require retailers to keep the weapons away from public access. PC Justice critic Wayne Balkin says the bill unfairly targets retailers. We'll hear more about that. And people in the PAW are on on alert this morning after 2 inmates escaped last night from the Paw Correctional Facility. One has since been recaptured and arrested again, but one more is still out there. We'll hear the latest coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Your commute is moving fine so far this morning. It's quite early, of course, but please call May McKillop if you have any issues. 788-3093. Like issues with traffic. You can call May with your other issues. She's very kind. She'll probably take your call, but we're talking about the commute. All right, Abby, the weather, what's up?
Yeah, we're looking at a mix of sun and clouds today, becoming cloudy in the morning. We're going to see highs ranging from -3 in Churchill to 11 for Steinbach and Morris. Right now, Winnipeg, 4 degrees. It's clear outside, a mix of sun and clouds. That would shift to cloudy conditions as we get into the late morning. We'll see highs near 9 degrees. And today will be cooler than yesterday, but still feel warmer than the usual for this time of the year. And for tonight, we'll see the clouds still remain, the sky will remain cloudy with light north breeze picking up overnight with deep to 1. Up north, we're seeing a chance of flurries, and then down south, it's going to be a mix of sun and clouds with highs close to 11 degrees. Right now, Winnipeg, 4 degrees.
We'll play more of this beautiful music, I promise. But let's hear more about it. We're going to start the show today with the words of Anna Hanna Frsuva that you're hearing, written while she was imprisoned in Czechoslovakia during the Holocaust. The voice that we're hearing singing belongs to Anna's granddaughter, Lenka Lichtenberg. After discovering her grandmother's diaries, Lenka used those words as lyrics for a solo music production. Now that production, The Secret Poetess of Terrasan, is on at the Bernie Theatre in Winnipeg. Lenka Lichtenberg spoke to CBC's Faith Fundal yesterday.
Welcome. Hello.
Well, thank you so much, Faith. I'm delighted to be here.
That, the words, but also in the way that you sang that is so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
What were you thinking when you sang those words?
I'm always in my imagination with my grandmother and try to live somehow through the same emotions that she would have had when she wrote those words. So that puts me right in the middle of the picture.
Talk about your grandmother. Who was your grandmother?
My grandmother was a very lively woman who was, I think, a little bit spoiled. Everybody catered to her and so on. And she had a very, very good life until World War II, when, because she was Jewish, her and her husband and my mother, Renee, were deported to Terezin, or Theresienstadt in German. And everything changed for them. And they lost everything, and they lost family, and so that's what she was. She was first one thing and then another. And then another yet, because after the war, she was again this very light-hearted woman that I knew. And only through the poems, I realized that she was not always just like that.
What was it like when you discovered these diaries?
It was a huge discovery. It was a surprise, a shock perhaps even, because I only knew her as this very somewhat flighty actually woman, who was very laughing and just having a good time. And
did it reconcile? Could you reconcile in your head what the words were in the diaries versus how you knew her?
Yeah, not at all, in fact, because I also saw her perhaps a little bit through my mother's eyes. And my mother's criticism of her mother was that she was superficial, which my mother wasn't. And so she said, yeah, well, Grandma doesn't take anything too seriously. She's just so flighty and so too light and too everything, all these things. Then when I was reading the poems, this was someone else. This was someone very pensive, very philosophical, deep. And so who is this person? So, yes, so it was a shock on many levels. Also, I didn't know that she liked poetry. So to me, all of it was a surprise.
Take me to the moment when you decided, I have to put these words into music. I have to be able to say these words, but also to sing these words in a way that people can hear and can feel. What was that moment like for you?
It was very reassuring. I mean, it took me a year to get to it. When I found the poems, I was so taken by that. I wanted to really do justice to it. So the first thing was to perhaps give them to a museum, Holocaust Education Museum somewhere, Yad Vashem somewhere, because it was like a historical artifact. It's not every day you find something new from that era. It just doesn't happen. So I thought, I need to do the right thing with it. And I wasn't sure, though, because putting them behind glass somewhere in a museum where somebody's going to see just the first page and nothing else.
It's not the same.
What would do that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was already hidden for 80 years or whatever it is. So, it wouldn't really achieve anything. And so I thought, no, to really celebrate it and bring it to life and give it on to others, I have to do more than that. And being a musician, it was the obvious thing for me to do. So I said, okay, I'll have to pick whatever speaks most to me and set it to music. And so there was a year later. And once I decided that, it was a pretty straight path from there. Then it just kind of did it itself. It took me 3 years, but but I felt like my hand was being led, from above somewhere. Yeah.
Does the play and the music in it show the variations of your grandmother that you described there, where at part of it is, okay, playful, but then the words show this pensive, this way that didn't come out in real life, but was forever burned onto and written down in diaries. Is that something that people will see?
Yes, it is. It's chronological, so you first get to know her through this other lighthearted side, and you see there's a strong visual component as well. So you see her beautiful self, how she's prancing around Europe in fancy clothing and all that. So you see that, and then the bang comes, the big bang. When they go to the concentration camp, and suddenly the tone changes completely, and different things start coming out. Yes, so you will be taken on that journey with me.
What do you? What is the experience like for the audience? How would you characterize what you hope they will see, hear, and feel?
I think first of all, my purpose as an artist, I think, is mostly I love beauty. Beauty. It sounds so silly, probably, to say that, but
it's a good descriptor of the work that you do.
Yes. So to me, it has to be beautiful. And if it isn't, then I've missed the point somewhere. So first of all, it has to be that. So I am trying very strongly and just following my intuition as a musician, whatever. I mean, people have different tastes, of course, but I just go with what I think is beautiful and hope that other people will relate to it as well. So I try to present a really rich and beautiful music, and I hope that the music serves as a bridge for people to be open to hearing the story that's behind it. And so there is some educational even element to that, because not everybody knows a lot about the era and of the Holocaust and World War II and so on, which of course is spoken. It's the historical side is not the focus. The focus is the story of this woman, a very beautiful woman who was very, very creative. So that's really the focus. But on the sidelines, of course, you get to know all these other things. And you are led to that by what I hope is beautiful poetry, which it is for sure. I can say that because I didn't write it myself, so I'm not patting myself on the shoulder. Yeah. But what I'm hoping also, very secretly, is what people will find is beautiful music.
What do you? You just came from a local school this afternoon.
Yes.
What was the most surprising moment today as you heard from them?
How good they were and listening and being open to it, and I had a real proof right there, a living proof that the music is the bridge, because I can be talking about these things for an hour and it just becomes a lecture and dry, and maybe somebody will tune out after 2 minutes, but because of the songs, they don't, and they're actually captivated. And it was quiet. You could hear a pin fall, and I was really impressed how these young people were interested and willing and able to even listen without much stimulation. These days it's the attention deficit there. So yes, I loved that they were able to connect to the stories through the music, which I would always hope that that's the case.
Lenka, thank you for making space to talk about this, and take good care.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted. Thank you.
Lovely conversation there between CBC's Faith Fundel and Up to Speed yesterday with Lenka Lichtenberg. The performance, The Secret Poetess of Terrazan, is tonight at the Bernie Theatre in Winnipeg. That's at Rady Jewish Community Campus. And it's part of Rady JCC's J-Fest Winnipeg. We do have a pair of tickets. So if you're an early morning listener here, we're going to reward you. So we're going to make it very simple. If you were listening thinking, I'd love to see that show, just give us a call, okay? So 788 3093, 788-3093. I know that's the traffic line, but May's actually on the traffic line this morning. So instead of making her pick up 3 different numbers, just call May, okay? 788-3093, and we'll give away a pair of tickets to that show tonight. We'll announce the winner coming up in the next half hour of the program, and we'll also hear a little bit more music from the program. I just didn't want to rush it in here. It's just way too beautiful, and I want to lean into those lyrics. So, all right, next on the program, we are going to be talking about food waste. But first, I just want to give you a bit of an alert here. We do have something going on in traffic. Traffic signal pole on the median has been knocked down at Isabel and Ross. That's because of an overnight collision. So Isabel and Ross. Everything else, signals are working in that area. Eastbound Jubilee between BDI and Osborne, there's fire trucks blocking right now 2 eastbound lanes. So use caution if you're in that area. So 2 things, in fact, developing. Call us if you need to, 788-3093, which is the traffic line. And also this morning, we're getting a winner for those tickets. Right now, it is 6:24 a.m. and I mentioned food waste. There's a new option to deal with food waste here in Winnipeg. This month, you might recall that the city announced that Winnipeggers will be able to drop off food scraps at one of 15 stations that they're setting up to divert food waste from our landfills. So these stations officially opened October 15th last week at 3 4R Winnipeg depots, and then there's other locations like community centres around town. This morning, we're looking at a new report, though, from Second Harvest. It's a food rescue organization, as nearly half of the food produced in Canada, nearly half of it goes to waste. Kiera Toffelmeyer is Vice President of Innovation at Second Harvest and with us now. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. So what kinds of foods are still in 2024 most often wasted?
Yeah, so we're seeing all kinds of foods go to waste, but the 3 that we're seeing being wasted in the highest volumes are field crops, so things like bread and bakery products from like corn and wheat and soya. Produce, a lot of fresh and processed fruits and vegetables, and then dairy, so your milks and yogurt and cheese. So a lot of really nutrient-dense foods wind up going to waste.
Are we just not getting the message about storage? Are we buying things too big? Do we have a sense of why this continues to be such a problem in the country?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's a lot of answers because we're seeing food waste occur right across the food supply chain. So from production all the way to, at home for the consumer. And some of the reasons are things like grading regulations and specifications, some poor storage and inventory management. But then 2 of the major drivers we've seen grow really significantly over the past 5 years that affect the entire supply chain are climate change, which is making it a lot harder to plant, grow, and harvest crops, and especially with the consistency that is often required by the retail specification. And then another big one that we've really been talking about a lot is best before dates and sort of confusion around what exactly a best before date is.
So let's clear up the confusion, because I know that at least my knowledge about this is best before is a suggestion of when the product's going to be at its freshest. Doesn't mean you can't consume it afterward, but a lot of people do see it as an expiration date. They're different things.
Yes, you are right. It's so
Woo-hoo,
great
10
to hear you
points.
say that. Points for you. But to kind of what you were getting at, like a lot of people understand it as an expiry date, when in fact there are only 5 products in Canada that actually have expiry dates, which are things like meal replacements and infant formula, nutritional supplements. So anything with a shelf life of over 90 days or more does not require a best before date. It's just like a manufacturer or retailer, sort of to your point, best guess or estimate at when that product will maintain like its peak freshness or optimal quality. And it has nothing to do with food safety. And that causes confusion because a lot of people think, 12 at midnight on this date, it needs to be thrown away. And so we wind up throwing away perfectly good items that have years of shelf life left on them. So we're really, really advocating for more awareness around best before dates and actually changes to our labeling practices in Canada.
Changes how? Because I was wondering with labels, why don't they just put expiration dates on things and be done with this? Or is that just too dangerous for people who are putting the food out?
Okay, you are on our team. We need to you need to get work with us. But yeah, we would love to see the elimination, or at least an investigation of how the elimination of best before dates on foods would impact Canadians. But we're really advocating, at least for starters, for the introduction of a pilot program to eliminate best before dates on products that have a shelf life greater than 90 days. We've seen best before dates on products like salt. I've seen them on water bottles before. So there's a lot of products that just don't need them, and it is a huge contributor to food being thrown away that it doesn't have to be. So that's what we're advocating for as a starting point.
How? What's the impact of food waste on people who are struggling with food insecurity?
Yeah, I think probably all of us know, food is more expensive than it's ever been, the cost of living. So there are a lot of people really struggling with food insecurity right now. And I think knowing that in parallel with the volume of food going to waste is really alarming. So one of the things when food businesses reduce their waste by putting surplus food donation programs in place for the stuff that's still good and edible and can be made use of, that's a way that supports communities, supports nonprofits, supports people that are experiencing food insecurity by being able to access some of that surplus while at the same time preventing good food from going to waste. And then also in general, I know I've said it before, but education around best before dates. A lot of our nonprofit partners have told us a lot of the folks accessing programs are confused around best before dates too. So just more broadly, education around best before dates will help reduce our waste, help us all save some money, and extend the shelf life of the products we have.
All right, Kira, thank you very much for the conversation.
Thanks so much for the time.
That's Kira Toffelmeyer, Vice President of Innovation at Second Harvest. We reached her this morning in Toronto looking at this new national report about food waste in the country. If you missed yesterday's show, we were looking at the food bank report about how often Canadians are needing to use food banks. We also looked at that through a lens here locally with the CEO and President of Harvest Manitoba. You can find that interview on the CBC Listen app if you want to check it out. You can go back on our YouTube stream as well on yesterday's show and have a look. 4 degrees in Winnipeg, 788-3093 if you want to call us with traffic. We know that Isabel and Ross, you could have a downed light standard there because of an early morning collision. And there had been fire trucks blocking 2 eastbound lanes at eastbound Jubilee between BDI and Osborne. So you could have delays there, although it's quite early. But call if you have any updates and let me know. 788-3093. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:30. 4 degrees and gone are the double digits. It was beautiful yesterday, but today still warmer than seasonal, a high of 9 with a mix of sun and clouds to start, more clouds moving in through the day. People in the Paw are on edge this morning after 2 inmates escaped from the Paw Correctional Centre. RCMP were notified around 7 last night. Using police dog services, a drone, and with the assistance of Manitoba First Nation Police Services, 1 inmate was caught and arrested around 8:30 last night. Another, though, is still out there. 29-year-old Brandon Anderson is from Nelson House. He's described as 6 feet tall, 170 pounds, with a history of weapons offenses. Police say he is considered dangerous. The RCMP is asking people in the Paw to turn on their exterior lights. And to make sure their doors and windows are locked, people are also asked to be vigilant and to stay indoors and call 911 if they see anything suspicious. That is happening in the Paw this morning. We'll bring you the latest as we learn more. The Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service is working on rolling out a new system for how it dispatches firefighters and paramedics. Ryan Sneath, Deputy Chief of Paramedic Operations and Training, says right now calls fall under two categories. Priority 1, lights and sirens. Priority 2, no lights and sirens. He says they will be shifting to a 5-category system.
We looked at 5 years worth of data and we took all of our outcome data related to those calls, and we said this type of a call requires this type of a response based on that information. So we were able to make an informed decision around what types of incidents require a timely response.
Sneath says priority 1, time-dependent calls won't see a change. However, the rest will fit into the other 4 categories based on the needs of the patients. A portion of low-acuity medical calls will go to a community paramedic who helps over the phone. In some cases, that is already happening. Manitoba's opposition PCs say a bill to restrict machete sales unfairly targets retailers. The NDP government tabled a bill earlier this month after a number of violent attacks. It would restrict the sale of machetes and other long-bladed weapons to people over the age of 18. But PC justice critic Wayne Balkin says the province should also go after people who possess machetes for unlawful use.
They could put a prohibition for somebody to carry them if there's no recourse or legal recourse for somebody to be having them with them. So that would give police and peace officers the justification to then seize these weapons, if nothing else, and get them off the street.
If passed, the bill would require retailers to keep machetes away from open public access and keep records of sales for at least 2 years. Manitoba's premier says his government's moving ahead with the plan to hold an inquiry into the Winnipeg Police Headquarters scandal. But Wab Canoe says the inquiry won't examine other city construction projects subject to audits. The procurement and construction of the police headquarters has been the subject of at least 2 scathing audits and an RCMP investigation, as well as civil litigation. Canoe says the inquiry aims to prevent similar mistakes from happening in the future.
Recommendations would be like, given the current legislative framework that exists in Manitoba today, how do we ensure Manitobans have confidence that your money is going to be invested in big public projects in the right kind of way? But in terms of what is going to be considered to deliver those recommendations, we'll be looking at the police headquarters.
Canoe says the province is in the process of drafting the inquiry's terms of reference, setting out a timeline and budget, and picking a commissioner. Now to the Saskatchewan election and a 5th straight majority victory for the Saskatchewan Party.
Saskatchewan's best days are still ahead of us, and you believe that the Saskatchewan Party is the best choice to lead Saskatchewan to that brighter future.
Saskatchewan Party leader Scott Moe, who returns to the legislature with 35 seats, but the NDP are close behind with 26.
We might not have crossed the finish line first, but my friends, we have changed the landscape in this province.
NDP leader Carla Beck, the New Democrats won every seat in Regina and all but 2 in Saskatoon. For the Saskatchewan Party, they have been in the province in power since 2007. We're following another provincial election result in this country. After more than a week of ballot counting last week, a winner emerged in BC's provincial election. The NDP poised to form a majority government pending the result recounts in 2 ridings. Thick black smoke wafted over the Manitoba legislature last night. Crews were called to a fire in an encampment just off Assiniboine around 6 last night. No one was hurt. The cause is under investigation. And it was a good run.
Connor scores! He's got 2.
Kyle Connor in the second period on Prime last night in front of the Jets' first sellout crowd of the season. But it was the first loss of the season, too. The Jets falling 6-4 to the Maple Leafs. Connor Hellebuck stopping 30 shots. Coach Scott Arneal says his team wasn't ready to go the way Toronto was.
Toronto was a heck of a lot better than we were. They wanted it, and they came in here and gave us a punch right in the nose.
So Winnipeg's winning streak this season ends at 8, or to start the season anyway. It is now back on the road. Winnipeg's in Detroit tomorrow night. You can find more news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather said it this morning, and she just said it in her lead again. It had to end sometime. We all knew that. So what a start to the season. All right, it's 6:36 a.m. Let's find out about the start to your Tuesday, October 29th weather-wise. It's time for your regional forecast. Abby, what's it looking like?
We're looking at a mix of sun and clouds across the province, gradually becoming cloudy as we get close to midday. Looking at the map in front of you, you can tell it's we're like ending the era of double digits, and we're just going to be sticking to like single digits, and we should be seeing more of like minuses very soon. Right now, 4 degrees in Winnipeg. It's clear outside. We should see a mix of sun and clouds today, becoming mostly cloudy as we get late into the afternoon period. We're going to see highs close to 9 degrees for the city today, and then the skies will stay mostly cloudy as we get into the evening period with light breeze. Then we drop to around 1. Heading west to Brandon, 2 and partly cloudy also. We will see mainly cloudy skies for that region. Highs would also get close to 9 degrees, and the condition will remain partly cloudy with light breeze tonight. For folks in Brandon, you should be seeing the temperatures tonight drop to around -4. Now, we move now to Thompson, where it is chilly at 1. Mostly cloudy conditions we're seeing there also. The forecast for today calls for a cloudy day. There's a slim chance of flurries in the forecast. Expect about a high of 2 degrees for that region, though with a wind chill, it's going to be feeling around the sub-zero mark of -6. Further north in Churchill, we saw light snow earlier. That's stopped for now. You are at -1. You should expect cloudy conditions. There still is a good chance of the light snow returning later, so brace for that. The winds will be breezy from the west, making it feel close to -12 this afternoon, so you might want to prepare for that. Dauphin is at -1 and partly cloudy at this time. The forecast calls for a mix of sun and clouds, reaching a high of 7, and then tonight a few clouds will still stay behind, and you drop down to -5. Gimli at 1 at this time. Partly cloudy skies were seen in that region. The forecast for the Interlake region calls for a mix of sun and clouds, becoming cloudy this morning. We'll see highs of 8, and then partly cloudy conditions will continue into the night with light breeze. Steinbach at 2, partly cloudy also, heading to a high of 11, and in Morris we're looking at 3 degrees at this time. Partly cloudy skies you're seeing. The Pembina Valley region will see a mix of sun and clouds as you get into the day. Then getting late morning, you see more clouds roll in and highs near 11. Tonight, it's going to stay mainly cloudy still. So across board, a mix of sun and clouds, and then becoming gradually more cloudy as we get to the mid-morning period. Right now, 4 degrees in Winnipeg.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
It's time for the morning commute update with May McKillop. Good morning.
Good morning. What we're hearing about so far, there's a traffic standard on the median that's been knocked down due to an overnight collision, as well.
That's at Isabel and Ross?
At Isabel and Ross.
Yep.
Thank you. I skipped right over that first part.
Been there.
Yep. Also, we got a call earlier in the show from Catherine to say that eastbound Jubilee between BDI and Osborne, there were fire trucks blocking the 2 eastbound lanes. I'm curious to get an update on that spot if anyone's there and wants to give us a call. Also, anything else you're hearing on the show or out on your commute, we want to talk about it here on the show. We just got a call from Dan on a bike saying that he's having a great commute. So thanks for that. Give us a call, 204-788-3093.
Thanks, May. Well, Crystalie Ramlakan is here with business news, but first I want to have a little bit of fun. Abby, you want to have a little bit of fun? This is like one of my favorite things because often, Halloween's in 2 days. Hi, Crystalie.
Hi, good morning.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good. So Halloween's in a couple of days, but I always like to ask people on this day, because you've got a couple days, there's always people that don't know what to wear, what to dress up as, what the costumes are going to be like, right? So I always like to ask people either, what are you working on, that you're excited to share, or sometimes you want to keep it a surprise. So what's the best costume you ever saw? What's the best costume you ever saw, or one that you want to shout out? So I don't know if you guys have answers. I can start. But do you remember Janice Moeller, Crystalie? You worked with her here in Winnipeg.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Janice, longtime producer here, right? Senior producer of audio here at CBC Manitoba. Janice would show up in these epic outfits. So one year she came as a 70s rec room.
Oh my God.
So she.
Oh my gosh. You know what? I feel like I kind of remember that.
I think you saw this. I think you were in the newsroom. She had on a full like a suit, but it was like made out of like really like a fabric that would be a wallpaper in the 70s. Imagine. And then she had on her feet, as I recall, or it might have been right behind her. Like a shag carpet. Like she had a boarded shag carpet that she was on top of, and it was orange, and I think the suit was green. She might have been representing the couch, but she was a rec room, and then there was paneling involved somehow in her outfit, and it was absolutely inspired. I loved it. My friend this year is going as a cast.
Oh.
So she's going to dress head to toe in white and carry Sharpies and let people sign her. That's fun, right?
That's fun. I love that. I love the interaction.
I know.
Yeah, well, Janice's fashion was always impeccable, even when she wasn't dressing up for Halloween. But I just went to a Halloween party this past weekend, and I saw something really interesting that my friends did. So they dressed up as like Alien, like Sigourney Weaver, and then the alien.
Just watch the new one.
Or someone coming out, the alien coming out of someone. And my friend, he 3D printed all of the stuff. So he 3D printed this like the whatever, how it looks, the alien
head
spider looking thing on her shoulder.
Oh
her
no,
gun.
the thing that jumps on people and then gets inside them.
Yes, the like the play gun she was carrying, and then also the alien like coming out of his stomach. He 3D printed all of that. It was amazing looking.
Oh, so smart, so gross.
I guess mine is just lame because I saw a Scooby-Doo guy yesterday. He was dressed like Scooby-Doo with a scuba bag, and I'm like, I'm just going to give that guy a shout-out.
He deserves a shout-out.
He deserves a shout-out.
They can't all be gross, right?
All right. Yeah, very gross looking. But I wore a costume that I've had since like 2016 or something.
What is it? It's held up, obviously.
Yeah, Mad Hatter costume.
Oh, yeah, classic, right? Yeah. So what's the best costume you ever saw? We'll take calls on this morning. I think it could be good fun. 788-3205. Or if you're not worried about giving it away, what are you going to dress up as in a couple of days? What are you planning? Let's turn our attention to the more serious stuff with Krista Lee and the business news. The Canadian Medical Association, Krista Lee, wants to eliminate sick notes requirements at workplaces in some cases. A lot of people interested in this. So what are the details?
So this would be for short-term illnesses, and it says that the requirement burdens physicians with unnecessary administrative tasks, and the association says it detracts doctors from patient care while burdening the healthcare system with around 12.5 million unnecessary interactions every year. So a new survey found that around 1/3 of working Canadians were asked by their employers to produce a sick note for a short-term absence at least once in the last year. And Dr. Joss Reimer is the president of the CMA, and she says doctors want to spend the limited time they have with patients actually caring for them, not filling out paperwork to address a human resource issue. She also says it's frustrating for people as the last thing they want to do when they have a migraine or a cold is go to a clinic. She says they should be resting so they can get better and then they can actually go back to work. So here's what else she had to say.
We're saying too, this helps to spread viruses because either you come into the office and you potentially spread the virus to whoever else is there who may be sick or have a low immune system, those kinds of things, or 82% of people we surveyed told us they'd rather go to work sick than get a sick note. So that means they're going into the office and spreading it to their colleagues, and that means even more people are going to be homesick from work. So it's not even beneficial to the employer to have a policy like this.
So the CMA is calling for legislative changes to restrict the requirement for sick notes and promote alternatives such as more flexible leave policies.
Let's go to another story. The Canadian dollar has been weak lately. What's behind that?
Yeah, so the dollar dropped to a near 12-week low against its U.S. counterpart last week, and it's being pressured by the Bank of Canada's most recent interest rate cut. Lower interest rates tend to be unattractive for foreign investment, and there's also an uncertain outlook for the economy ahead of the U.S. presidential election. Donald Trump has proposed sweeping tariffs on imported goods, and Canada sends about 75% of its exports to the United States. Here's Sean Osborne, who's the chief currency strategist at Scotiabank.
We were expecting a bit of a pickup in the Canadian dollar into the end of this year, but it looks at this point certainly a bit more likely that we'll see a bit more softness, or certainly some more persistent softness in the Canadian dollar. in the next few weeks at least. Obviously, down the road, we've got not too far now the US election. That could have a major impact on market volatility and the performance of the US dollar and the Canadian dollar. So there's still potentially a bit more movement in the CAD to come in the next few weeks.
So last week, the central bank reduced its benchmark rate by 0.5 percentage point to 3.75% to try to help support the economy. And that was actually the first cut of that size in 15 years outside of the pandemic era. And Governor Tiff Macklem also says Canada's recently announced immigration reduction targets will likely have an impact on the Bank of Canada's growth forecast.
How are the markets looking this morning, Christly?
In Europe, markets are slightly higher. Germany is up, the UK is up, France is up. In Asia, markets are mostly climbing. Japan is up, Shanghai is down, Hong Kong is up. Oil is up $1.06 to $68.44 US per barrel. Gold is up $8.20 to $2,750 US per ounce. And the dollar's up 0.06 of a cent, but it's still at 72.1 cents US.
All right, Christly, take care, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
Christly Ramlicam with Business News. It is 13 minutes to 7 o'clock, 4 degrees in Winnipeg. And we have some music to play for you now that's connected to something that you may have heard on the program earlier this hour. We heard the words in this music of Anna Hanna Frisova, written while she was in prison in Czechoslovakia during the Holocaust. And the person singing this tune is Anna's granddaughter, Lenka Lichtenberg. She discovered her grandmother's diaries, and she used the words as lyrics for a solo music production that's on tonight at the Bernie Theatre here in Winnipeg. So we're going to announce who won the tickets to that show, but first let's lean in and listen to the all-important lyrics here. This is called Remember the Sun. From the Secret Poetess of Terracin.
Eternally redeemed, eternally. In the darkest night, remember the sun. Remember the sun. What is this place? Where have we come to? What happened to the way how you used to look at me? Lost eternally, redeemed eternally. In the darkest night, remember the sun. Remember the sun. Love is the only spring through which life is born. Cherish your life and never have regrets. Never have regrets.
Beautiful, right? Bring some Kleenex tonight. The Secret Poetess of Terracin is on at the Bernie Theatre in Winnipeg. The event's part of Rady JCC's J-Fest Winnipeg. And congratulations to Christine, who won tickets this morning. It is 9 minutes to 7 o'clock on CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. Well, next on the show, let's turn our attention to federal politics. It is a week of deadlines in Ottawa. Today, October 29th, as we've been hearing and being reminded of on World Report, is the deadline the Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet gave the Liberal government to pass two pieces of legislation. So Blanchet warned that if his demands weren't met by today, he would start negotiating with other parties to trigger an election. So the deadline also follows yesterday's deadline set by a couple dozen Liberal MPs asking Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to resign as leader. For a closer look at all of it, Ryan Tumulty is parliamentary reporter with the National Post. Hi there.
Hi there.
So first of all, let's remind everybody what the two pieces of legislation that the Bloc wants to go through are.
Yeah, so the first is a boost to old age security payments. Those payments are boosted for seniors over the age of 75 right now. The Bloc wants them boosted for all seniors, so anyone over the age of 65. The second bill is a proposal around the supply management system. So that's the system for dairy farmers and poultry farmers. It sets quotas domestically about how much a farmer can produce, and it also keeps out foreign competitors. And that the idea behind that is that it stabilizes the prices for farmers and theoretically for consumers. So the Bloc bill would prevent a future Canadian government from trading away any part of that sector in any kind of trade deal. The government has signed trade deals where they let go part of that sector. They open up a little bit more to Canadian competition in exchange for other things. This bill would prevent them from ever doing that again. It passed through the House of Commons. There was sort of mixed support in the House. Some Liberal MPs voted for it and against it, same with the Conservatives. Where it has hit a roadblock is the Senate. The Senate is moving through it very slowly. They're not expediting it. It's not a government bill, so they're not under any pressure to do so. Although the Trade Minister, Mary Ng, has asked them to expedite it. But there are senators over there who are former trade negotiators and who feel like this is a bad piece of legislation, that it would, tie the hands of future trade negotiators.
So most Canadians are leaning in and saying, is this going to happen or not? And right now it looks like it's not going to happen. How much of an immediate threat is this for the Liberals, though?
Yeah, it's not a huge threat, I don't think, for the Liberals for two reasons. One, the House is kind of stuck in this procedural debate that it has been in for a while. And so it can't move forward. You couldn't put a non-confidence motion in front of the House right now until that issue is settled. Now, that said, if the Conservatives wanted to clear things up to get a non-confidence motion, if they thought they could bring down the government, I'm sure they'd move expeditiously to do so. The other problem for the Bloc, though, in terms of the relevance of this threat, is that the Liberals can still get by with support from the NDP.
Got it, yeah.
So, this doesn't carry the same weight as it might otherwise carry. And, I think for right now, the Liberals are comfortable with the landscape as it is.
So let's look at the other deadline of the week. The Prime Minister came out firmly before this deadline and said he's remaining as leader, even though 24 MPs gave the Prime Minister until yesterday, so that deadline's passed, I should clarify here, to respond to their calls to resign. How did that actually shake out? He just basically said, nope, not doing it, and moved on?
Yeah, he said, nope, not doing it in about less than 24 hours. That threat came at Wednesday's caucus meeting. By Thursday morning, he said, I will be staying on as leader. I will be leading the party into the next election. So far, these MPs have not said, a what comes next. They didn't. Their deadline didn't come with a or else of any kind. So it's sort of unclear as to what happens next. Some of these MPs have talked about a secret ballot vote in caucus on the Prime Minister's leadership. But the Prime Minister would have to agree to that, and I'm not. He doesn't seem very inclined to do so. So in terms of what's next, these MPs mostly have stayed anonymous. Only a few have actually come out and said on the record, I don't support the Prime Minister.
Yeah, there's a pack of 3 on the East Coast, yeah.
Yeah, so it's possible at this point, some of these guys will come out and say publicly what they've been saying privately. They could sit as independents. They could leave the party. But again, we haven't heard that from them, and I'm not sure they're prepared to escalate it that far.
Yeah, he's put it back on them. We have a minute left, Ryan, but can you tell us about this? We're switching gears quick, but Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre announcing if he elected yesterday, announcing if elected, he would eliminate the GST on new homes under $1 million. What are the fine points of that Canadians might want to understand?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big promise. It's something, obviously, on a big issue for Canadians, with housing being a really central concern for people. It would save somebody about $40,000 on an $800,000 home. And certainly, lots of people, I'm sure, would be interested in that savings. The one thing that's interesting about it is, unlike a lot of home programs, especially the ones the Liberals have brought in, it's not targeted at first-time home buyers. So in theory, someone who was, say, a real estate investor could take advantage of this program, buy up, 7 houses in a new build, rent them all out, and not pay GST on any of them. So that is something that I think is going to be interesting to watch. Certainly, the Liberals have been critical of it on that theme already, and it's a big promise. So it would cost about $8 billion, potentially as much as $8 billion, I should say. He has said he would pay for that by getting rid of a lot of Liberal housing programs, which, of course, the Liberals argue are effective right now.
Thank you very much for covering so many topics for us today. Appreciate it. Lots going on.
No problem. Take care.
You as well. That's Ryan Tumulty, parliamentary reporter with the National Post, joins us to look at federal politics most Tuesdays here on the show. All right, let's go to Heather Wells, who's here locally following headlines and news. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, people in the PAW are being asked to turn on exterior lights and make sure their doors and windows are locked this morning. 2 inmates escaped from the PAW Correctional Centre last night. One has since been rearrested, but another is still out there. 29-year-old Brandon Anderson is described as 6 feet tall, 170 pounds, and we do have his photo up on our website. Police say he is considered dangerous. So that developing story this morning in the PAW. And the NDP government is moving ahead with plans to hold an inquiry into the Winnipeg Police Headquarters scandal. Premier Wab Kinew says it is important to understand what went wrong. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
In the weather forecast, partly cloudy, 4 degrees, a mix of sun and cloud for the day, and a high of 9 in Winnipeg with light winds. In traffic, Isabel and Ross traffic standard is down there in the median lane. Also, eastbound Jubilee between BDI and Osborne, fire trucks were blocking 2 eastbound lanes. That may still be an issue. Catherine called a little earlier this hour. 788-3093 if you want to call as well. In the next hour of Information Radio, skeletons serving each other drinks. As you could probably be hearing around Halloween, you're probably seeing a lot of skeletons, but these guys are huge. And we sent CBC's Jim Agapito to check out how they're competing lawn to lawn. It's a really fun Halloween story. Stay tuned. In addition, do you feel your age? For some people, the answer is no, and specifically for some young people. It's because of the pandemic, they say. So we're going to hear a little bit more about what some now are terming pandemic skip. That means if you're 22 years old and you still feel like a teenager, why is that happening? We're going to talk to a young person all about that, so stay tuned for that. And more in a story that Heather has had in the news this morning, which is those fire paramedics teams that are responding to tens of thousands of calls, more today than 5 years ago. And they shared with CBC's Alana Cole how that's changing how they can respond. We'll have more on that story. Stay tuned.
Today on The Current, Saskatchewan Party leader Scott Moe is hoping voters will hand him a 5th straight mandate.
I'm Susan Ormiston. Fall has turned into election season in Canada, with voters in Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, BC, and New Brunswick going to the polls. What those elections tell us about the direction of the provinces and the country, coming up on The Current.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The Saskatchewan Party is holding on to its majority for another term. Vote counting went late into the night, but ultimately Scott Moe held off a close challenge from the New Democrats. His party has been governing Saskatchewan for the past 17 years, but these results show the province is increasingly divided. The CBC's Alexander Silberman has more.
Scott Moe's Saskatchewan Party celebrating a win after holding off an NDP surge.
This was a much closer election than what we have seen in quite some time in this province.
Mo and his team won a comfortable but reduced majority and a historic result. They're the first party to win 5 straight elections since the Tommy Douglas era. But the Sask Party also lost key seats in the cities, with the NDP under leader Carla Beck nearly sweeping Regina and Saskatoon.
Now, we might not have crossed the finish line first tonight, but my friends, we have changed the landscape in this province.
Beck says those strong results for her party send a strong message and puts the NDP in a position to keep growing.
I know this isn't the result that we had hoped for, but let me tell you, tonight is not the end.
As for Scott Moe and the Sask Party, they face a new climate in government, and Moe acknowledged he has work to do to win back voters he lost.
I've heard that message, and we must do better.
The Sask Party also faces a new challenge, governing a province with an urban-rural divide, an idea Moe downplayed in his victory speech, promising the next Saskatchewan Party government will strive to unify the province. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Regina.
In British Columbia, NDP leader David Eby has met with the Lieutenant Governor to form the next government. He narrowly won the provincial election with a majority, but not before a marathon session of counts and recounts. Now we're waiting for him to address the public. Eby has already said he will work hard every day to earn the trust of British Columbians. It is now down to the wire for the candidates in the U.S. presidential election. Both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have exactly 1 week to try to win over voters. The CBC's Chris Reyes joins me now from New York. And Chris, Kamala Harris is holding a rally today in Washington, D.C., and it is happening in a significant location. What can you tell us?
That's right. So Kamala Harris will be addressing a crowd of thousands at the Ellipse. It's a massive park just outside the White House near the National Mall. And it's also where Donald Trump famously gave a speech on January 6, 2021, just before a violent mob breached the Capitol. So why this place? Well, it's central to Kamala Harris's campaign for president, that argument that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy and a danger to the White House. Now, some critics say that this isn't the right move, given how close this election is, especially in the swing states that will ultimately decide the vote. But this location does give her something that other places don't, a presidential setting. Delivering this kind of address in front of approximately 20,000 people, just steps from the White House, will allow her to draw a powerful visual contrast between her and Donald Trump. And she will be able to project what kind of leader she would be instead, should she win next week.
There's been some reignited controversy following comments made at Donald Trump's rally this weekend. He is speaking in Pennsylvania tonight. What do we know?
That's right, Pennsylvania. It is one of the biggest of the 7 swing states. It's considered a must-win for both candidates. Now, over the weekend, Donald Trump held a massive rally at Madison Square Garden in New York. One of the biggest headlines to come out of that was negative comments made by a comedian about Puerto Rico. In Pennsylvania, there are 472,000 Puerto Rican Americans. Their vote could be decisive, especially when Trump and Harris are nearly tied at the polls. In this visit, Trump is expected to do some damage control in this very important state.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
The CBC's Chris Reyes in New York. South Korea is warning North Korean troops could be moved to the front lines of Russia's war on Ukraine. NATO has confirmed Pyongyang has already deployed troops to Russia's Kursk region. And today, North Korea's foreign minister is in Moscow for strategic talks. As Crystal Gomansing reports, this is generating concern about the expansion of the war.
Cho Sun-hui, North Korea's foreign minister, is in Russia for her second visit in 6 weeks. The diplomatic trip comes amid growing concerns about Pyongyang's increasing involvement in Russia's war on Ukraine. Today, South Korean officials shared information they say confirms North Korea has gone beyond providing weapons to Russia, deploying troops. Information backed up by the United States and NATO on Monday. An expanded global threat is how Mark Rutte, NATO Secretary General, described the presence of North Korean troops in Russia's Kursk region.
The deepening military cooperation between Russia
and North Korea is a threat to both the Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic security. It undermines peace on the Korean peninsula and fuels the Russian war against Ukraine.
North Korean troops deployed to Russia have been estimated to be as high as 10,000. Russia and North Korea signed a mutual security pact last June. It's that deal that brings the foreign minister to Russia for today's strategic talks. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Veterans Affairs Canada says it is launching an investigation in response to CBC News journalism. Our analysis found some veterans may be paying too much for long-term care. The CBC's Kate McKenna brings us the details.
It's a kind of a slap in the face.
Retired Colonel Michel Drapeau says he believes tens of thousands of veterans ended up overpaying for long-term care because of a miscalculation.
We're not talking about millionaires here. We're talking at the, if not at the poverty level, something higher, but not very, very much.
He's part of a group of lawyers who filed a class action application yesterday, following an analysis by CBC News that found a potential error in how Veterans Affairs calculates the cost of long-term care. Some veterans in nursing care pay a flat rate. Right now, it's about $1,200 per month. It's determined based on the cost of care in the cheapest province. But our analysis found the federal government didn't include the 3 territories when determining that fee, and the law says they should have. Long-term care is cheaper in the Northwest Territories and has been for decades. Drapeau says he thinks that means veterans have overpaid hundreds and thousands of dollars for nursing care. When we put this to Veterans Affairs, the department said it would launch an investigation. That's not good enough for Sandra Goodwin. She's with the Veterans Legal Assistance Foundation.
Veterans Affairs Canada has one job, which is to support these veterans and their families, and they fail miserably time and again.
She says if this mistake was made, then veterans and their estates deserve justice. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada could be about to join the list of cities with world-class rail systems. Our colleagues at Radio-Canada have learned Ottawa will soon unveil plans for a high-speed train service. It will run along the Toronto-Quebec City corridor, and it could cut travel times by rail in half. The CBC's Paul Dehacek has more.
I think it's a terrific idea.
It's long overdue.
Outside Toronto's Union Station, plenty of appetite for a high-speed train linking Toronto and Quebec City, including from Erica Borja, who makes the trip from Montreal about once a month.
It took me like 4 hours and some change to get here this morning, which isn't bad, but if it'll cut an hour, I'm absolutely curious about it.
Radio-Canada has learned the Trudeau government will soon announce plans for the high-speed train. Sources say it will travel 300 kilometers an hour, double the speed of Via Rail's current trains.
What we're seeing with the announcement is a true game changer.
Pierre Barriot is a consultant and lecturer in transportation planning at the Université de Montréal. He says at that speed, traveling by train becomes a realistic alternative to flying.
Because all of a sudden, Quebec City to Toronto is just a few hours.
I think maybe Canada might be at a turning point.
Paul Langan is with the advocacy group High Speed Rail Canada. He hopes this news could spur action on high-speed rail in other parts of the country.
I think it'd be like the USA, where once you finally get it somewhere, another corridor all of a sudden springs up.
A spokesperson for Transport Minister Anita Anand wouldn't confirm the news because the contract hasn't yet been awarded, though sources tell Radio-Canada the plans will be announced in the coming weeks. Barriot predicts the project will be finished in stages and will be fully wrapped up around 2040. Paula Duhacek, CBC News, Calgary.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Information Radio live in downtown Winnipeg on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM, also on the app and on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. Well, as Halloween quickly approaches, there have been reports of some styling skeletons in one Winnipeg neighborhood.
The full-length yellow rain slicker, Hornbonium, and then
it was
Care Bears on
Care
the
Bears,
front?
on the poncho, and then the purple wig, I think, on Boney M. And they were in that canoe with the paddles all ready to go because it was raining, of course. So they were making it.
Skeletons canoeing in two Winnipeggers' front yards. We sent CBC's Jim Agapito out to investigate a really fun story, so stay tuned for that. Also, in a moment, we're going to play a call of one of the best Halloween costumes you ever saw, as we're asking you this morning. And to serious matters, this hour on the program, we're going to talk about something that's been termed the pandemic skip for people who feel younger than they actually are because of critical years around graduation that were lost to the pandemic. I think it's something that I know in my own life I've heard about with young people in my life, but we're going to get that firsthand perspective about what that feels like and how much of a trend it is for those that are in their early 20s. Right now, let's get to what's going on in the news otherwise. Heather Wells joins us. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, people in the Paw are on edge this morning after 2 inmates escaped from the Paw Correctional Centre. RCMP were notified around 7 last night. One has since been rearrested, but another is still out there. 29-year-old Brandon Anderson, considered dangerous. RCMP asked people in the Paw to turn on their outdoor lights and make sure their doors and windows are locked. We'll bring you the latest coming up. And the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service is working on changes to how it dispatches first responders. We'll hear about that as well in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby, the weather looks kind of similar to yesterday.
Yeah, similar to yesterday, but not as warm as yesterday. That's what I'll tell you. We're seeing a mix of sun and clouds today, unlike yesterday that we saw sunny conditions. Look, we are done with the era of the double digits. Now we're just going to be falling into single and minuses. Right now, a mix of sun and clouds that will be seen across the province, gradually becoming cloudy as we approach a mid-morning. We will see highs varying from like 2 in Thompson to 11. It's going to climb up to 11 for Morris and Steinbach. Right now, 4 degrees in the city. It's clear outside. We will see this mix of sun and clouds in the city shifting to mostly cloudy as we get towards the lunch break, and a high of 9. Cooler than yesterday, but we're still feeling the warm, which is warmer than the usual for this time of the year. And then we see more cloudy conditions as we get into the night. We drop to 1. That's light snow is back for folks in Churchill at -1, Thompson at 1 at this point. It's going to be cloudy, chance of flurries up there. We'll see temperatures drop between -3 and 2 degrees for the north. And then down south, we're seeing temperatures climb all the way to 11. 1 in Brandon, 1 in Gimli, 3 in Steinbach, and 4 in Morris. Right now, 4 in Winnipeg.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Let's find out what Tuesday morning traffic is like. May McKillop is in for Corey today.
Good morning. We've had a couple of calls on the commuter line. One spot that we are notifying people about is on Isabel and Ross. There's a traffic standard on the median has been knocked down to an overnight collision. If anyone's there and sees what's going on there, we would love an update. As well, I just got 2 calls from David and Shannon letting us know that there is a collision on Kenniston just south of Waverley. Now, emergency crews are on site, but they're blocking both northbound and southbound lanes. So Kenniston is down to 1 lane on both northbound and southbound. Anything else people are seeing out there, we would love to hear about it. Give us a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, May. Well, we did get a call on the listener line, a different number, different topic, but ahead of Halloween, we were asking you to inspire those last minuters. We know you're out there. I'm always one of them. What was the best costume you ever saw or created?
Yes, some of the best costumes that I didn't wear but that I made. One was for someone involved with the Dental Association, a giant molar tooth. And the other one was a wine bottle. And I went into a liquor store. You could do that back in those days. And just sketched a picture of a particular wine bottle. And then I made it. And the person who wore it was really quite pleased with it. And for both costumes, I needed hula hoops to help with the shape. So it was lots of fun to make. Thanks. Bye.
I really want to see the molar now, right? The big tooth. That's amazing. Obviously, some skills there. One of my faves, colleague here, Terry McLeod, who hosted this show for many years, I co-hosted with him. He would love Halloween, and so for his kids one year, one of my faves was he did the cereal box thing, but then it was Fruit Loops, and he took donuts, I think, and they were dried, and then he painted them, like spray painted them different colors, and put them on for the big giant loops, which I thought was so cool. So best costume you ever saw or made, and bonus points if you can do it in a day, because we're trying to help out the last minute folks for Halloween. 788-3205. Well, let's begin with this trend I was mentioning. Some are calling it the pandemic skip, a term for folks who feel that their mental age isn't quite the same as their actual age because of the pandemic. We're about to meet a Winnipeg woman who is 22, but says at times she still feels like a teenager, and she does think it's because of the pandemic. When she missed key milestones in her life, they were put on hold or, as I mentioned, lost altogether. Rianne Sully is feeling the pandemic skip and here to talk more about what it feels like. Hi there.
Hi there. How's it going?
I'm doing well. I'm glad you're here to talk about this because I know there's people in my own life that either from the parental point of view or else, I have nieces and nephews that are all in their early 20s and they all talk about this. Same thing that you're describing. You're 22. You say you still feel like a teenager. Can you describe that to me? Like in what situations where that comes up for you?
Honestly, it comes up in the randomest times ever, such as like filling up documents. Sometimes I'm like, am I supposed to sign this? Like, I always have to like double check with my parents, be like, oh yeah, like there, right? And they're like, yeah, that's where you're supposed to sign. You're an adult now.
Why do you think you still feel 18? I know that's the age you put on yourself. So why do you think that is for you?
I mean, because I graduated in 2020, it just feels like I never really got to like actually finish high school and be done with the whole experience, have a graduation, like a party after, all these things, all these milestones that I had to skip over because of the pandemic. I think it just feels like it's just always there. It's never gonna like kind of be finished, I guess.
So there's something about that closure that would have maybe happened that for you was completely missed.
Yeah, honestly, that's how I put it. I would put into words.
You also missed exams, right? Like it wasn't just, people talk about grad, which I understand why, but you also missed some of that ending of the actual formal school years after all those years. What did that feel like?
Like a lot of when I tell people I never did my exams, they're like, "Oh my God, that must have been so nice and that." And I'm like, "No, it wasn't. I studied really hard, but I never got to actually do the exams, which sucked." But yeah, just a lot of things like such as exams, like assignments that I was working on for a long time, never got to submit them. Like it just sucks. Like the whole situation just sucked. Pretty much.
What are the conversations like with you and your friends? Because, I understand you guys have had this talk about the pandemic skip.
Oh, yeah. We talk about this all the time. It's like, you know what, like the younger people say right now, it's like my Roman Empire. That's literally our Roman Empire. We talk about how we never got to like do pepper rallies together or like have an actual grad together or like a drive-through grad did not really feel like a grad. A lot of my friends, we didn't even get to see each other because we have different last names and it was just not working. But we always have conversations about how we are unsure about making decisions and how hard it is to actually take the extra step of making a big decision in our life because we still feel very young and we feel like we haven't moved on from that part of our life yet. Even though it's been like 4 years, which sounds crazy. But yeah, it just feels like we're always like, it's always in the back of our head, kind of.
So what does that mean for how you feel when you're in a setting with like a post-secondary educational setting and you're feeling younger, as you said?
I always feel like the youngest person there. Like no matter, even if there's somebody who's freshly 18, I feel like I'm closer to age to them than somebody in their mid-20s, which is very odd.
What do you think that youth like yourself might need to get back on track or to gain confidence? Because you're talking about feeling younger, and you've given some examples where you don't feel confident to do certain things that would be, I guess, for lack of a better term, what do we all say today? Adulting, right?
Yeah, I feel like honestly, taking that extra step of just reassuring myself that like 22 is still young. Like 18 is not like the last age of being young. 22 is still young. Being in your 20s is still young, period. And like life is too short. Like you can still like start over doing all these things. Like it's fine. Like 18 does not just like mark the last time you can be young.
Yep. It absolutely does not. I can attest to that. I am wondering, though, if the pandemic had not happened, given that you're talking about sort of this feeling sort of right now for a lot of people, what do you think you might be doing with your life? Would it have, how might this be impacting you in that bigger way?
I would have definitely been in law school right now. I like made a lot of different decisions for myself during the pandemic. Honestly, it gave me a lot of exposure. Not everything was negative about the pandemic. It gave me a lot of exposure. It made me more connected to social media, kind of build a little bit of a platform for myself. So I feel like I would have been like a completely different person right now. But I think I'm pretty happy with the person I became. Honestly, I think I've educated myself on a lot of topics that I would have not been able to if I didn't have the time for myself that I did during the pandemic.
So as you said, it's only 4 years, right? Difference. Yeah. And I'm not minimizing that. I'm just saying, it seems like a small amount of time, but the impact's been big. We can hear that. What would prevent you from going into law now?
I think I kind of connected with more of my creative side than my educational side, I guess. And then I also educated myself on how law school works and how like our system kind of works when it comes to laws and all these things that I never really thought about. I guess I was just like, oh, I'm just going to law school in high school. But the more research I made, the more I kind of like shifted towards a more creative side. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's why like the exposure of being home alone for that long and expressing myself in a way that I never had the time to during the pandemic kind of helped me to kind of become a different person.
It's almost like the train got disrupted because there's there's like a natural train for people, those that are going to choose post-secondary education. Some people still choose a gap year or other things or working or depending on your life. But if you're going to go post-secondary, it's almost like, you're just going to kind of keep going. All right, grade 12, then okay, first year. But that gap somehow gave you time to think about yourself in a different way, it sounds like. And lean into other things. Have you decided whether that's going to be, you're saying you're feeling positive about it. Is there room to get back on that track, I wonder? Like, I wonder whether or not what you wish would be there to sort of help through this transition moving forward for all young people.
Honestly, I think what it is, just follow your own steps. I always compared myself to people that never took a gap year or never like did the things that I did personally. But I figured out like I am my own person and I go with my own pace and I'm created differently than what people are. And I took those steps and they kind of helped me to come up with the things that I'm interested in, the things that I like. And that's why I thought like the time of me being home for like 3 months, 4 months did really help. And I think that's why a lot of people came up with like different fashion trends, different hairstyles, like those crazy hairstyles. I think it's because people actually sat and came up with things that they personally liked and they did not feel pressured of like the society of how they would judge them. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, if they have enough time to sit with themselves and think about what they actually want, they would totally have different like walks and different like opinions on things.
Super interesting conversation. I really want to open the listener lines on this one. Rianne, thanks for starting it, and all the best with your future. Appreciate meeting you.
Thank you so much.
Via Zoom this morning live with us, Rianne Saleh. She's 22, but says she at times feels 18. It's this phenomenon known as the pandemic skip. So if you're listening and you're a young person and you're feeling the same way, or maybe you have a story in your family about this, or, how did it shift plans? Does it cause you any anxiety? Or are you looking at it positively? Have you found sort of a different path that you never thought about because of pandemic skip? 788-3205 is the number to call. That's a big talker. 7:25 a.m. is the time, though. It is 4 degrees in Winnipeg. The high today, 9, and it's time for morning sports. And that means that Claude Faig is in this morning for Scott Regehr. Hi there.
Good morning, Marcy.
So let's start with the Jets. They were finally taken out of autopilot and brought back down to earth yesterday, right? Had to happen.
Yeah. Well, Marcy, what's that old saying about all good things must come to an end? Well, this thing was really good for the Jets, of course, who came out of the gate with 8 straight wins and were sitting on top of the NHL standings. Last night, though, you can perhaps chalk this one up on the column of the unexpected, because the Maple Leafs, who were in town, had struggled under first-year coach Craig Berube, just a .500 record, but got a big game from former captain John Tavares. Tavares piloted the Leafs' attack with 3 goals, scored the opening goal, and then, of course, scored the empty netter as the Leafs stunned the Jets 6-4. Now, defenseman Josh Morrissey was asked post-game about having the streak snapped.
We were hopeful to go 82-0, but that's never been done. It was a tough game for us. Obviously, got behind it, but we never quit throughout the night. And I think we were 8-0 for a reason, we're 8-1 for a reason. So that compete to battle back and make it a game so that we could pull the goalie and see if we could try to tie it up. That's the character of our group, and we'll look at what we need to get better at, get some rest, and move on.
Yeah, and that will begin Wednesday when the Jets fly off to Detroit to face off against the Red Wings.
And I've been watching baseball like every single game. I'm addicted.
Yeah.
Holy moly, though, I did not expect the Yankees to be stomped like this, but the Dodgers are now a win away from clinching the World Series.
Yeah, that's true, Marcy. The World Series has proven to be as close as many predicted, with the first 3 games decided by a total of 7 runs. What wasn't predicted, or more like hoped by fans, was that one of the teams, the Dodgers or Yankees, would be up 3-0 in the series and on the verge of a sweep. And that's where the Dodgers sit after another victory against the Yankees, this time in New York last night. And now Shohei Ohtani was back for the Dodgers. He, of course, injured his shoulder in Game 2, scored a run, but the big stick came from Freddie Freeman, who's the dual national and proudly flies the Canadian flag for his parents, who were both born in Ontario. As he swung the big stick again, homering for the 3rd time in the series, as the Dodgers won 4-2. Freeman talked about his recent run at the plate.
It felt like it was a constant battle all season long with my swing. And it kind of happens like that. This game's hard. This is round ball and round bat and moving a lot of different ways and coming fast. So I'm thankful that it's in a good spot right now when we need it the most. But right now I'm just seeing the ball very well. I'm swinging at the strikes, taking the balls. It's what you're trying to do every game, and thankfully I've been able to do it.
And the Dodgers can close out the series back in New York tonight.
And Spain sweeps the FIFA Top Player Awards, eh?
That's right, Marcy. FIFA has honored its top footballers with the prestigious Ballon d'Or for nearly 7 decades, and no one has hoisted that trophy more on the men's side than one Lionel Messi, who's done it 8 times, including last year. Now, outside of a World Cup win, it's probably the most prestigious trophy sought by soccer players. Just ask Real Madrid star Vinicius Jr., who, along with his club Real Madrid, boycotted the ceremonies last night because he didn't win. Now, ironically, it was a Spanish footballer that did claim the top prize, with Manchester City midfielder Rodri getting the nod, and it became a Spanish sweep when Atina Bonmati, who plies her trade for Barcelona, won on the women's side. And for the 26-year-old, the award goes well beyond just simply having some hardware on the trophy case.
It's really nice to go down the street and see boys and girls wearing your shirt. When I was a child, I didn't see that in the street. I only saw girls wearing the boys' shirts. What would I say to them? Well, although many things have changed, there is still a long way to go to achieve equality. But let them take that opportunity with gusto. Right now, you can be a 10-year-old girl and say that you want to be a footballer, because the possibility really exists.
So as the Spaniards say, vale, and needless to say, we suspect there was probably a little bit of extra sangria flowing in España yesterday.
Well, coming up, speaking of drinks, we got some scary skeletons in Winnipeg that are actually pouring a drink or two. So giving us the segue. Thanks, Claude.
All right, have a great day.
That's Claude Fag filling in for Scott Reguer. So to those skeletons now.
And she was presenting Skelly with a plate full of grapes and a tropical drink with an umbrella, of course.
So where are these skeletons serving each other drinks? Coming up, we're going to have a fun Halloween story from one of our reporters, Jim Agapito, who is out and about in Winnipeg. Right now, though, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is 4 degrees. A mix of sun and clouds this morning, but more clouds moving in through the day. And we are slipping just a little cooler than yesterday, but still warmer than seasonal. Today's high is 9. People in the PAW are on edge this morning as RCMP search for an inmate who escaped last night. CBC's Alana Cole has details on this developing story.
The RCMP is asking the PAW residents to turn on exterior lights, stay indoors, and ensure windows and doors are locked. Police say they were notified at around 7 p.m. yesterday that 2 inmates had escaped from the PAW Correctional Center. RCMP say officers started searching with the help of the Manitoba First Nation Police Service, a drone, and the police dog service. One of the inmates was found at about 8:30. The other, 29-year-old Brandon Anderson from Nelson House, has not been found. Police say he's 6 feet tall and 170 pounds, and he was last seen wearing gray sweatpants with a yellow stripe and a gray t-shirt or sweatshirt. Now, police say he is considered dangerous and has a history of weapons offenses. Now, they also want people to call 911 if they see something suspicious. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
And you can see a photo of the escapee, Brandon Anderson, on our website this morning. The Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service is working on changes to how it dispatches first responders. Ryan Sneath, Deputy Chief of Paramedic Operations and Training, says right now calls fall under 2 categories. Priority 1, lights and sirens. Priority 2, no lights, but still sirens. Now they're in the process of shifting to a new 5-category system.
Timeliness to critical emergencies. So we recognize extending times getting to critical emergencies just because of the sheer volume of calls. And so we knew we needed to address that. We knew we needed to make sure that we had paramedics arriving at emergencies that required time-dependent care.
Sneath says the new system will likely roll out early next year. The opposition Tories say a bill aimed at curbing machete sales doesn't go far enough. The NDP government tabled the bill earlier this month after a number of violent attacks. If passed, it would restrict the sale of machetes and other long-bladed weapons to people over the age of 18. The bill would also require retailers to keep the weapons away from public access and to keep records of sales for at least 2 years. But PC Justice critic Wayne Balkin says the bill unfairly targets retailers.
What I see right now is a bill that really is very taxing on retailers, the people that are selling this, but it's not taxing on the criminals, the people who we should be targeting.
Balkin says the province should prohibit the possession of machetes in order to give police more power to seize the weapons from those who shouldn't have them. The NDP government is moving ahead with plans to hold an inquiry into the Winnipeg Police Headquarters scandal. Premier Rob Canoe says the province is in the process of drafting the inquiry's terms of reference, setting out a timeline and budget, and picking a commissioner. The NDP had pledged to call an inquiry into the procurement and construction of the police headquarters, the subject of 2 scathing audits, an RCMP investigation, and civil litigation.
There's a really important public need for us to understand what went wrong here, what mistakes are made, and most importantly, to look ahead to the future. How can we prevent something like that, or some of these situations that have been described in the media and in court? How can we avoid repeating those in the future?
Canoe had said he would be open to broadening the scope of this inquiry to include other city construction projects subject to audits, but now says the inquiry will focus on the police headquarters project only. Well, Scott Moe and his Saskatchewan party won a majority government in a provincial election last night. The Saskatchewan party is leading or elected in 35 ridings, the NDP leading or elected in 26. Scott Moe spoke to his supporters after midnight.
We knew when we started this campaign that it was going to be a challenging campaign. Recent history has not been kind to incumbent majority governing parties in this nation or around the world. We saw what had happened in British Columbia, New Brunswick, and Manitoba a short while ago. But we also believed that we had a message and we had a record that we could be proud of.
Carla Beck's New Democrats won every seat in Regina and all but 2 in Saskatoon, but it wasn't enough to beat the incumbent government. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Well, it was good while it lasted.
Beautiful goal! Kyle Connor on the weak side. A lifeline for Winnipeg.
Kyle Connor on Prime last night with 2 goals for the Jets. Still, it wasn't enough. The Jets fall to the Toronto Maple Leafs 6-4, and this perfect season comes to an end with 8 straight wins. Coach Scott Arniel says it was like the Leafs punched them right in the nose.
There's momentum building, and then all of a sudden we'd make whether it was a mistake or maybe have it was a turnover or bad coverage, whatever, and all of a sudden Toronto would get some great chances. And it was just those first 2 periods, that's a lot of what we did. It was just kind of shot ourselves in the foot.
Connor Hellebuck making 30 saves for the Jets, and now it's right back on the road. Winnipeg's in Detroit tomorrow night. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
All right, let's get into what's happening in our forecast. It's time for your regional forecast with Abby.
Good morning once again. We are looking at a mix of sun and clouds across the south today. The north will be seeing cloudy conditions with a chance of flurries also in the forecast. Right now, it's still 4 in Winnipeg, mostly cloudy now. Today's forecast will bring a mix of sun and clouds, turning mostly cloudy as we get late into the morning. We will see high near 9 degrees rather, and then tonight it's still going to stay mainly cloudy with a light north breeze dipping to around 1. Brandon, 1 at this time, mostly cloudy also. Expect mainly cloudy skies today, high near 9 degrees, and then for tonight to deep to -4. Thompson at -2 and mostly cloudy. The forecast calls for a cloudy day with a slim chance of flurries in the forecast, high of +2. Churchill at -1 with light snow falling at this time. For today, expect cloudy conditions. This light snow is going to stay with you on and off for the most of the day, with winds being breezy, dropping temperatures to around -3. Dauphin is at -1 and clear at this time. The forecast calls for a mix of sun and clouds for that region, reaching a high of 7, and then tonight the temperature is going to be dropping to around -5. Gimli, 1 and partly cloudy. The forecast for the Interlake region calls for a mix of sun and clouds, becoming cloudy this morning, and then you'd warm up to about 8 degrees. Steinbach, similar condition at 3 degrees, partly cloudy. The forecast also calls for a mix of sun and clouds, and you do warm up to 11. And tonight it's going to stay mainly cloudy. There's a chance of showers in the forecast, and then you deep down to 1. Morris, 4, partly cloudy. The forecast for the Pembina Valley region calls for a mix of sun and clouds, becoming cloudy this morning. You warm up to 11 degrees, and then tonight you drop down to 1. So across the province, we're just going to see this mix of sun and clouds, and then gradually turn into more like a cloudy day in some regions, and we'll see that highs ranging from 2 in Thompson to 11 for Steinbach and Morris. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at 4 degrees. We're aiming for a high of 9.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
With your morning commute details, Mamie Phillipson, we've had a couple calls, eh?
We've gotten a couple calls, yeah. We got 2 calls about a collision on Keniston. So this is just south of Waverley. There are emergency crews on site, but those emergency crews are blocking both northbound and southbound lanes on Keniston. So each of those lanes, northbound and southbound, are down to 1 lane. Also, just want to mention, Abby brought this to my attention. We've gotten quite a few calls over the last couple of weeks about this one spot. So I just want to let our listeners know, westbound Abinogi-Meekina between Lagimodiere and Lakewood, the westbound curb lane is closed for construction for a couple more days now. Anything else you're seeing out there, we'd love to hear about it. Give us a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, May.
You're welcome.
Well, for all you last minuters out there, for Halloween that is, and costumes, and maybe you're can't come up, don't have an idea of what to do, do, or maybe you're just making your costume and figuring out final touches. We asked for some inspiration today about what you're being for Halloween and also what the best costume you ever saw was. So call us and let us know, 788-3205, or you can send photos. So if you are on YouTube this morning, you're about to see some photos that have been sent in. So this first one is a squirrel. I love this. It's like, and you'll be warm too out there because you're just dressed like a big stuffy. This is Samantha Mitchell saying you were talking about Halloween costumes, and I just want to share that this is mine, and I've got a lot of comments. Halloween's my favorite day of the year, even though I'm 45 years old. Love that. And so there's Samantha sitting in her squirrel costume and acorns hanging around the neck like yeah, you'll be warm in that. That'll work for you. I think Abby said 4 or 5 degrees on Thursday. Another photo that came in, this is awesome. This is one of those, if I saw you at a party, I would just go, wow. This is Kevin, and Dana this year, and they are dressed up very elaborately and with all the details, no detail missed here, as Colonel Sanders with the tie, the goatee, all in white head to toe, and a chicken. Nice looking chicken, all the tulle in the back for the feathers. I think that's very creative, actually, just to get one of those skirts and put together a homemade costume there. And I love how on the top, actually, to mimic the chicken and in the top part of the chicken and the feathers and the colors, it's also just a whole bunch more tulle that is set up atop your head there. That's fantastic. So people sending in photos of Halloween costumes. If you've got a good one, maybe you already went out and about, inspire us, won't you? So please email your photos or post them on my Facebook page. That is Marcy Marcusa on Facebook. If you want to email a photo, radio893@cbc.ca. So that's how we get all those visuals to YouTube. And if you want to call us and just share your story about Halloween, what you're wearing, or the best costume you ever saw, 788-3205. 7:41, trying to brighten up our Tuesday morning here. It is October 29th. It is, as Abby mentioned today, going to be right around 9 degrees. Well, let's continue talking about Halloween. Next on the show, there are reports of some issues happening in a particular neighborhood of Winnipeg. This is an undisclosed location in Norwood. 2 skeletons named Skelly and Boney M have taken over neighbors Katie Anderson and Jennifer Lyon's lawns. Here's how Katie and Jennifer describe them.
And remember the day prior to that, it was 20 degrees. It was really beautiful. So Boney M was dressed in her hula skirt, and she had her lei, and she had a particularly interesting placed hair piece that was blonde, and it was just like a blob just there,
a jaunty little
on her head.
piece.
And she was presenting Skelly with a plate full of grapes and a tropical drink with an umbrella, of course.
The interaction between these skeletons has become somewhat of the talk of the town. So Katie Anderson and Jennifer Lyon say that the skeleton duo has been seen mowing the lawn, giving each other massages, and even recreating the infamous pottery scene from the movie Ghost, which is so awesome. Their intent is really not to scare anyone, but to entertain people who are going through their Norwood neighborhood. And a lot of them actively seek out the dynamic skeleton duo. So a lot of people are coming just to see this. And why not? So we sent CBC's Jim Agapito to check it out.
Well, I'm getting ready to watch a video.
Really? What?
Oh, just some scary movie.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Katie Anderson.
Jennifer Lyon.
We have some strange guests that have been appearing all October, and they kind of like rotate between each of our lawns.
Yeah, one day they'll be in Katie's lawn, and then the next day they appear on our front lawn. So we have no idea. It just seems to be a spontaneous thing that happened. And it's been almost a month that this has been going on. Every day there's a different scene that happens. We have store-bought skeletons that Katie actually started this a couple years ago because her skeleton just appeared in our bedroom window or something like that.
Somewhere along the way.
And then we got a skeleton, and then we thought, wouldn't it be fun if the skeletons had fun together? And maybe we'll make it public, and then we can bring some joy to our neighborhood and put a smile on people's faces every day. And apparently that's what's happening.
Apparently. Having a great time every morning. Guys, what are the skeletons going to do today?
Yeah. So they've appeared in a variety of scenes. They've had a massage. They've had a tub together. They went fishing.
Oh, that's right. They went fishing. It was a long weekend, a lot of fishing.
They've had a tea party. Today they're playing Battleship. And who knows what tomorrow and the next few days will bring. But every day is an adventure, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been easy and doesn't take much time out of our days at all. And like I said, it brings some joy to people's day and a smile on people's faces.
I mean, just saying, we're having a pretty fun time doing it.
This is Boney M.
Well, Skelly, the other skeleton, he's been around for years, and we've always had him out in the yard at Halloween time with the kids. But this year, Amanda invited us over to help decorate in your yard, right at right on October 1st. And
my
the kids
wife,
came
Amanda.
over. We were setting everything up in the yard, and we were talking about what we were going to do in our yard. And we mentioned Skelly, and then she was like, we're going to get a skeleton. And then all of a sudden, it was like, let's do skeletons together.
About 10 minutes later, it all happened. And there's really very little thought that goes in it.
It was perfect because it was the first day of October, so it was like a challenge. Can we do this every day in October all the way to Halloween?
So I hauled out the tickle trunk in my house, and I may just have a vast collection of costumes and wigs and things and funny noses and glasses, and Katie has the exact same setup. So every day we'll text each other or meet on the street and say, what should we do tomorrow?
It looks like rain. I think they should go fishing.
Exactly.
Or like it's going to be sunny. Maybe they can lounge on the lounger.
Yesterday in the rain, they were out on their boat with their rain jackets, and so it all works out. So we do it, we cater to the weather, and the other day when it was sunny, they had the aloha scene, of course, with the lei and the grass skirt and things like that. And we've got some fun things in mind for the next coming days, and I think we might do this till Halloween.
I think we'll definitely make it to Halloween.
We may have to just put the kibosh after that, but for this month, it's been a lot of fun.
Now, you said that they're playing Battleship?
Well, today they're both wearing jaunty plaid for this nice warm fall day. Boney M is sitting, and they both have matching cozy wool slippers on as well, because it is a cool day. And what do we call these?
Well, they've got the Groucho Marx nose and glasses on, matching, of course, because I think they're best friends.
It seems so.
Yeah.
After that first wave from the lawnmower, it's been...
That's right. They waved to each other.
That's
That was the first one. They waved to each other from our lawnmowers. So they're sitting in lawn chairs in Katie's front lawn. There's a table, and there's the game Battleship is set up in front of them. And it looks like Boney M has just lost, or we're not sure. But Skelly has a very satisfied look on her face. And
we have some mugs of hot chocolate and marshmallows, some instructions in case there's some disagreements over the rules,
Quite often we'll see the skeletons wave to people. They're just in a steady waving motion to people as they walk by, just to let people know that they're included in this scene.
So you've done over 20 scenes.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah. And more to come. And we encourage other Winnipeggers to get involved if you feel like this is something that we have a very special community here in our neighborhood. We have the best neighbors in the world. Katie and Will and their two boys, are part of that magic. And I think that's what makes Winnipeg special too, is the sense of community. And we can do something silly and fun like this, and people will walk by or drive by or ride their bikes by, and it puts a smile on their face for 3 seconds, and we feel, okay, our job is done. When there's two creative minds involved, actually 4, because of our spouses, they're involved as well. But, one of us will come up with an idea, and we always just roll with it. And if something happens, like poor Skelly had some orthopedic issues, and his torso and bottom part came apart, so there was an operation involved. So we just rolled with that. So the next thing we know, Skelly was in a wheelbarrow for a couple days until the surgery was completed. So so
you just roll with it.
You want Winnipeggers to just kind of organically discover this, eh?
Oh yeah. Whoever rolls by, I think it's great if it's a surprise. Like that is actually maybe one of my thrills from this month. Is you peek out and you watch a car go by and you see some kid in the passenger seat like, oh, what was that? Like it's the best moment.
And quite often we'll see people zoom by, and then the car will stop and then slowly back.
Like, what did I just see?
And then the car window beep, and then a phone comes out, click. So that brings us a lot of happiness.
If you wanted to give them a clue, the Winnipeggers, a small clue of where this could be, is that possible?
We're 7 minutes from downtown.
Okay. You can smell Red Top Burgers when the breeze is right.
That's a big clue. I
think that's enough. There's got to be some fun in the chase.
Those are pretty good clues, especially Red Top, right? And we told you already, Norwood. We're trying to be wide with this. So go out and find them. CBC's Jim Agapito did exactly that, speaking with Katie Anderson and Jennifer Lyon, and of course their skeletons, Skelly and Boney M, doing all kinds of things on the front lawn at this undisclosed location. So happy hunting. You've been calling us with some inspiration of costumes, either the best ones you ever saw or what you dressed up as this year.
Good morning. My name is Wayne Thompson. So when I was in high school, my girlfriend and I were invited to a party. And so I dressed myself up as a pine tree, and I dressed her up as an apple. So as we walked around, we could be our individual costumes. But what happened when we stood together or we held hands? We were a pineapple. That was, I considered, my best costume makeup of the time for Halloween. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Hi, this is about the Halloween costume thing. In the 60s, when late night or evening TV was full of variety acts, I went dressed as Phyllis Diller. It involved, I think, one of my mom's white blouses and a lot of jewelry and makeup and probably 2 cans of hairspray. Teased my long hair out, and the pièce de résistance was a cigarette holder, which would not go over well these days, I'm sure. Mostly I remember just having my hair washed afterwards for probably minutes, but it seems like hours when you're 8 or 9 years old. Anyway, that's my favorite all-time costume.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, you need a lot of hairspray to get the hair standing like Phyllis Diller's. And, pineapple. I wouldn't have got that right away. But then that's always the magic of those types of costumes, right? You're the punchline at the party. I love it. So more inspiration, please keep it coming. 788-3205. Best costume you ever saw or what you're dressed as this year. Remember, we stream the show live on YouTube. So we want to see if you've got photos. Let's say you were out and about already last weekend, maybe at a party. And some of you have already shared some of those photos, but keep them coming. You can email them radio893@cbc.ca or post on Facebook. Well, up next on the show, 2 serious matters and building on a story that you may have heard in the news this morning, whether it's a fire, an overdose, or a fall. The Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service says they have seen an increase in calls for help in recent years, and the data backs that up. In 2023, there were almost 30,000 more medical calls for service than in 2018 over that 5-year period. That's an increase of about 35%. Now, recently, CBC reporter Alana Cole spent time with the WFPS crew to get a better understanding of what goes into the work of first responders and explain some changes that are being made to meet the demand.
One night with some of Winnipeg's first responders. Up close, seeing what they see. We stop here, a call about a possible overdose near a city shelter. The patient's been given naloxone. Now he's going to hospital. Firefighter paramedic Adam Krawitz is part of the response.
We probably respond to at least 3 or 4 overdose calls a shift, and that's just my shift in particular. The drug problem in this city is getting worse. That's my opinion.
A car crashed into a house. Firefighter paramedic Alex Oliver says the man in the car was alert and talking.
You always have to err on the side of caution, even though they might not feel anything. That it's best to put a collar on them, tell them to stay perfectly still until we wait for the ambulance to get there.
The Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service received 195 calls for help between 5:30 at night and 2 in the morning when CBC spent time with them. That includes medical transfers. Scott Wilkinson, the Deputy Chief of Fire Rescue Operations and Training, says the number of calls to first responders has increased in recent years, and it can take a toll.
Volume itself is a challenge. I mean, we're experiencing burnout by some of our staff with the amount of volumes of calls. The types of calls are an issue. We're seeing an uptick in violence.
The amount of calls is one reason the service is changing how they dispatch calls with a new 5 priority system. Ryan Sneath is Deputy Chief of Paramedic Operations and Training.
So right now our call categories are priority 1, lights and sirens, or priority 2, no lights and sirens.
This is a district chief.
Officials want to ensure crews can get to critical emergencies, priority 1 calls in under 9 minutes. Sneath says those time-dependent calls won't change. The rest will fit into the other 4 categories. They won't use lights and sirens to get there. A portion will go to a community paramedic who helps over the phone. In some cases, that's already happening.
Early estimates before we roll this out is about 15,000 incidents a year will go to those community paramedics.
Adapting to the city's needs. Jennifer Lundeen is a district chief of paramedic operations.
There's a lot more drug overdoses now that we respond to. Like in the first 10 years of my career here, I think I saw Narcan being administered maybe 10 times ever in those 10 years. And now it's nothing to do 10 Narcan administrations in a tour or in a set of 4 days.
In many ways, this is where the response starts. We're in the WFPS 911 Communications Center. The people working here are the ones that take the calls, get the information, determine the priority, and dispatch the crews.
How many doses of Narcan have you given her? Listen carefully, I'll tell you how to do chest compressions.
Over the last 9 years of working in the Communications Center, Michael Grosvenor has seen changes.
Talking about the opioid epidemic in the city that we have and the difficulties and challenges with those. Seems to be more violent calls have increased drastically. The nature of the calls in the unknown, the uncertainty of people and our vulnerable population has greatly increased. 6 Charlie 1 Alpha.
Data from information coming in here and from the crews on the scenes helped shape the new system. Fire and Paramedic Chief Christian Schmidt says another reason for the change is cutting down the number of times crews are cutting through traffic with lights and sirens.
Really the move toward this is twofold. One, to become more efficient, but also to allow us to deploy our vehicles in a safer manner.
Schmidt says another shift is their work with the Downtown Community Safety Partnership, when outreach workers are better suited to help. Winnipeg's mayor is considering what it would take to get an emergency service for mental health calls. Schmidt likes the idea.
It's going to ensure that we get the right resource to the patient's side. And, in some cases that is going to be a mental health clinician.
You're older than that?
The new 5-priority system is expected to roll out in the new year. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Time right now is 3 minutes to 8 o'clock, and with more CBC News, Heather Wells is here now with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, people in the PAW are being asked to turn on their outdoor lights and make sure their doors and windows are locked this morning. 2 inmates escaped from the PAW Correctional Center last night. One has since been rearrested, but another is still out there. 29-year-old Brandon Anderson is described as being dangerous. Police say he is 6 feet tall, 170 pounds. We do have his photo up on our website. And if you're in the PAW, police are saying you need to be vigilant. We'll bring you more on this story coming up at 8:30 as well. The opposition Tories say a bill aimed at curbing machete sales does not go far enough. The NDP government tabled that bill earlier this month after a number of violent attacks. More Manitoba news coming at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Traffic, southbound Main at Higgins. There's a stalled car in the middle lane. There's a collision also eastbound Grant at the Roblin intersection. And I know that May's been on the phone, so we may even add to that. But right now, that's what we've got to this hour. Please update us if there's any problems. 788-3093 is where you can call. 4 degrees in Winnipeg, mainly cloudy, and a mix of sun and cloud is what we're expecting for today with a high of 9. So it will feel cooler than yesterday. Yesterday actually turned out quite lovely. Calm, sunny, and I think our high was around 15, but today just 9 degrees in Winnipeg. Well, coming up in the next hour of the program after 8, how can we better protect the women in our lives from violence? This is a question many have been asking specifically after a university student was attacked while sleeping at her dorm at U of M.
We put the onus on women to protect themselves, but we don't listen to them when they share what they need.
We're going to dig into that conversation after 8. In addition, as you may have been hearing in the news, Premier Wap Kinew did announce a public inquiry into construction of the Winnipeg Police Service headquarters. So we're going to hear more about the details and what the Premier had to say about what he's hoping to glean and learn from all of this. So that's coming up after 8. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We have national and international news next. It's 1 minute to 8 right now. You're listening to CBC 89.3 FM on the app or YouTube.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Before her sudden death in 2023, Lisa Marie Presley was working on a memoir with the help of her daughter, Riley Keough. Riley will be here to talk about that memoir. It's called From Here to the Great Unknown, and about her mom's life growing up as the daughter of Elvis Presley.
Show my little daughter, Lisa. She's 6 years old. Look at her jump up.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcast.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Susan Ormiston. Fall has turned into election season in Canada, with voters in Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, BC, and New Brunswick going to the polls. What those elections tell us about the direction of the provinces and the country, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The Saskatchewan Party has won its 5th straight majority.
Because you know and believe, as do I, that Saskatchewan's best days are still ahead of us, and you believe that the Saskatchewan Party is the best choice to lead Saskatchewan to that brighter future.
But it was a tight race. Scott Moe's Saskatchewan Party won 35 of the 61 seats in the legislature. Carla Beck and the NDP scooped up the rest, including Regina and all but 2 seats in Saskatoon.
We might not have crossed the finish line first tonight, but my friends, we have changed the landscape in this province.
Beck and the NDP ran on a pledge to fix healthcare and education while pausing or slashing certain taxes. Moe also ran on broader tax relief, and he promised his first order of business would be to ban biological boys from using girls' change rooms at schools. In British Columbia, NDP leader David Eby has met with the Lieutenant Governor to form the next government. He narrowly won the provincial election with a majority, but not before a marathon session of counts and recounts. Now we're waiting for him to address the public. Eby has already said he will work hard every day to earn the trust of British Columbians. Once again, Justin Trudeau's government is facing a deadline from the opposition. The Bloc Québécois wants 2 of its private members' bills to be passed today. If that does not happen, Yves-François Blanchet has threatened to help topple the government. Janice McGregor is in our parliamentary bureau. And Janice, have we heard anything about a last-minute deal?
Marcia, in a word, no. Ever since the Bloc issued its ultimatum, Liberals have been assuring reporters that they're in talks to try to reach some kind of compromise, particularly on the Bloc's push to improve seniors' pensions. But barring some kind of 11th hour drama, those talking points have not delivered results. And so we expect Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet to signal that his party is now no longer willing to prop up the government in future confidence votes. However, this is a bark without bite, at least in the short term, because the House of Commons remains bogged down with what's essentially a multi-week filibuster by the Conservatives. No government business can proceed, but no more opposition day motions can be introduced either. Plus, the Bloc's already had its slot to introduce a confidence motion earlier in the fall. It won't get another one until next winter. Conservatives, however, do have a motion on notice that would try for a third time to pull the plug on this parliament. Pierre Poilievre was out mocking the Bloc leader yesterday.
Blanchet has delivered nothing for Quebecers. So it's time for the Bloc to work for Quebecers rather than working for Trudeau. Vote for a carbon tax election.
And remember, it's not enough for 2 opposition parties to be working to bring the Liberal government down. The NDP, too, must turn on the Liberals. Leader Jagmeet Singh told reporters yesterday he's not afraid of an election, but his party's not looking for one either. Maybe just a matter of time, he said, as they keep taking it vote by vote.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. In exactly 1 week, Americans will be heading to the polls. It is the final push for both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump as they try to secure the presidency. One crucial block of voters, members of the Mormon Church. They typically lean conservative, but some Mormons say Donald Trump's character is turning them away. The CBC's Richard Madden has more from the church's base in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Mormon voters or LDS voters are the most likely to say they don't have a political home.
Speaking from campus in Provo, Utah, Brigham Young University sociologist Jacob Rue has studied Mormon voting patterns for decades and says the fast-growing denomination may be the last of the Christian right resistance in the era of Donald Trump.
LDS voters care deeply about the Constitution. They believe the Constitution was inspired of God. I believe, and I've argued and I've shown data, that January 6th is a breaking point for LDS voters.
He says Mormon voters value character and compassion and found Trump's MAGA brand has repelled roughly 12% of Mormon voters since 2016 and increasing ever since. A small but influential vote, he says, that helped swing Utah's neighboring battlegrounds of Arizona and Nevada to Democrats in 2020 by the slimmest of margins and could repeat in November. While the church strives to stay politically neutral to its 7 million members living in the U.S., both presidential campaigns are aggressively courting LDS voters to help tip the balance. Scott Watson is voting Democrat this time.
We should love everybody, and everybody should be loved and feel love instead of hatred.
Christine Forbes is staying with Trump.
I don't think that he does necessarily share all my values. I feel like he's a stronger leader.
Many here are watching the Mormon vote closely in an election that appears to be dividing the flock. Richard Madden, CBC News, Salt Lake City, Utah.
The U.S. and other allies of Israel are expressing concern about Israel's ban on UNRWA. Last night, the government moved to stop the UN's relief agency from working in Israel. The legislation takes effect in 3 months. Critics say it will have devastating consequences for Palestinians, especially those in Gaza. Sasha Petrusik has more from Jerusalem.
With two laws quickly passed, Israel's parliament, the Knesset, plans to effectively shut down the United Nations' main humanitarian effort for some 6 million Palestinians. In the occupied West Bank and annexed East Jerusalem, that means health and education services. But it's most critical in Gaza, where it's the backbone of all humanitarian efforts, even those delivered by other NGOs. Sam Rose is Senior Deputy Director of UNRWA in central Gaza.
We have a population here that's on its knees, going through absolutely untold misery and suffering. And the role that UNRWA is playing here is unprecedented.
Israel has long accused UNRWA of being infiltrated by the Hamas militant group. Lawmaker Sharon Haskell.
Hamas has taken over United Nations facility, schools, hospital clinics, and headquarters in order to use them as military bases to hide ammunition, to hide rockets.
Israel has implicated several UNRWA staff out of a total of 13,000 workers for involvement in last October's attack. UNRWA denies allowing Hamas to use its facilities and says it purges the organization of all suspected militants. Washington says UNRWA's irreplaceable role is all that prevents widespread starvation. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
There are more calls for change following a CBC News investigation into Rogers TV price increases. 1 week after our Go Public team highlighted customer concerns, the NDP wants the telecom giant to reverse those price hikes or face consequences. Erica Johnson has this update.
Will the Liberals have the courage to do it? Yes or no?
NDP MP Brian Massey rises in question period, calls on the Liberals to tell telco giant Rogers to roll back a recent TV price hike or be banned from bidding on future government contracts.
We don't believe that they should be rewarded anymore.
For more than a week, Rogers customers have been reaching out to Go Public, saying they feel misled after signing 2-year contracts they thought guaranteed a monthly price, only to see their bills go up, most recently by an increase to TV box rentals. 81-year-old Roger Burrows of Cultus Lake, BC.
They're devious. They tell you one thing and do another.
Language in Rogers contracts allows the company to up the price of things like rental equipment while customers are locked in. Contract law expert Marina Pavlovich.
These contracts are very long, difficult to understand, and they're generally unfair to consumers.
A spokesperson for the industry minister dismissed the call to shut Rogers out of federal contracts, saying they expect Rogers to clearly communicate contract terms and pricing changes to its customers. A Rogers spokesperson didn't address this latest pressure to reverse the price hike, saying most customers aren't affected, but wouldn't say how many are.
I would like to move a motion.
Meantime, members of the Parliamentary Committee on Industry and Technology have unanimously agreed to ask the CEO of Rogers to make an appearance to answer growing consumer discontent. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
There's a new Heritage Minute to mark Remembrance Day. It honors artist Mary Ritter Hamilton, whose work captured the aftermath of the First World War.
If I did not come at once, it would be too late. And these places that are watered with the best blood of Canada might only be names and memories.
Hamilton is considered by many to be Canada's first female battlefield artist, but she was initially denied the job because she was a woman. Hamilton traveled on her own to Western Europe. She braved disease, unexploded mines, and other hazards to create over 350 paintings. That is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I usually would say it's clear or cloudy, but I just saw my entire radio team looking out under the blind out at the sky, so I'm going to wait and let Abby tell you. I can tell you that we've been right around 4 degrees for most of our morning here. It's going to be a cooler day than we had yesterday in Winnipeg. I am Marcy Marcoux, as I mentioned. You're on CBC's Information Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube, live from downtown. Well, this half hour on the program, we're going to hear more about an announcement that was made yesterday and confirmed. Premier Wab Kinew saying that there's going to be a public inquiry into the construction of the Winnipeg Police Service headquarters. So we'll get some more details on that and how that moves forward. Speaking of moving forward, we're going to talk to Clinic about what we can do to prevent sexual violence in our community. And a lot of people are thinking about this right now on the heels of that attack that happened on that student at U of M in the dorm. So stay tuned. Right now, though, Heather Wells has more news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, on edge in the PAW this morning after 2 inmates escaped from the PAW Correctional Center. RCMP were notified around 7 last night. 1 inmate has since been rearrested. Another, though, is still out there. And people in the PAW are being told to turn on their outdoor lights and make sure their doors and windows are locked. We'll hear the latest on this developing story. As well, the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service is working on changes to how it dispatches first responders. We'll hear about these changes coming up at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
You want to stick around because you're actually pressed against the window, too.
Yes.
And May's in here. Hi, May.
Hello.
And Abby's in here. So I'm sitting in the, just so you know, listeners here, I'm sitting in the studio, and literally, like, all you guys had your faces kind of like pressed at the window. Abby, what's going on?
Hint, it is about 8 weeks to Christmas. That's the
Abby's
hint.
favorite subject.
No. Are they putting up the lights already?
Not just putting them up, they turned them on.
The lights are on.
Wow.
This is right outside the CB. I was up on the 2nd floor, and I'm going, what, is that a snowflake? What's going on?
Oh,
really early.
It feels early. I thought they used to wait, like most people say, till after Remembrance Day. I thought they at least waited till November. They're a little bit
Maybe it's
early.
just a test.
Maybe it's just
This
a
could
test.
be it.
I don't know. Wow. Yeah. People will not be happy, I don't think. Except me and Abby.
I'm Abby's just giggling.
I was just like, 8 weeks to Christmas, that's the sign.
No one likes Christmas more than that man over there. All right. So you might see that on your morning commuter drive. I mentioned, Abby, a little bit chilly this morning, hey?
Yeah, a little bit chilly. Though before that, we're going to get a mix of sun and clouds, gradually turning cloudy in some regions. We're going to see highs ranging from 2 in Thompson to 11 for Steinbach and Morris. Right now, 5 in Winnipeg. It was clear earlier, but we're seeing the cloud already rolling in. This morning, we'll see a mix of sun and clouds. And then, but as we get into the morning, those clouds will take over. And we're more like moving away from the era of double-digit temperatures. Yesterday was lovely, but today will be a bit cooler, still warmer than usual for this time of the year. We're only expecting a high of 9 today with more clouds coming in later. I would say the clouds are just stopping by to say hi before the snow starts pouring. Cooler temperatures in the north and cloudy, chance of flurries in the forecast. 1 in Thompson, -2 in Churchill with light snow. And then down south, we're seeing more like mostly cloudy conditions with temperatures hovering near 4 degrees for Steinbach and Morris, and Brandon and Gimli at 1 at this time. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at 5.
Yeah, in Winnipeg, we could see some snow on Friday, as you're saying. So, it'll melt. That's always what we start saying, right, at this time of year. May, we have had actually a couple things going on in traffic. Where are we at now?
We've gotten a lot of calls. I'll let our listeners know what I've heard about. And if anyone is in the areas and says, that's not happening at all, it's cleared, I would love to hear about it. Here's my little list that I got going. So southbound Main at Higgins, I've heard about a stalled car in the middle lane, as well a collision on eastbound Grant at the Roblin intersection. As well, I got quite a few calls about a collision on Kenniston, just south of Waverley. Emergency crews have been blocking the northbound and southbound lanes on Kenniston. We'll see where that's at. I would love to get an update. Also, we got a call in the last about 10 minutes ago about a collision on westbound Abinochi-Beacona, and then we got a call about 9 minutes later that it cleared. Yeah.
So that's what we need. We need to know if all those other things are cleared or where you're at.
I would love an update. Yeah, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Time right now is 8:15, and let's turn our attention to more serious matters in our community now. And a warning, actually, that our interview right now may affect those who've experienced sexual violence or know someone who's been affected by it, as so many of us do. As you have likely heard in the news this week, a University of Manitoba student has been speaking out after she was attacked in her dorm last week. A 46-year-old man who was previously convicted of 2 violent sexual assaults now faces several charges in connection to the latest incident. This has reignited a conversation about how to prevent sexual violence in all of our communities. And Rochelle Reddy is here to talk about it. Rochelle is with Clinic and, as I mentioned, is in studio. Hi there.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. So when we talk about prevention of sexual violence, obviously huge topic, but we do tend to focus on what women and girls need to do to protect themselves. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's time that we as society begin to challenge and change that narrative. It hasn't been working to put the onus on the bodies who are experiencing violence to protect themselves from violence. And it's time that we begin to look at how we can prevent those who perpetrate violence onto the bodies of others from engaging in that violence. So when we look at sexual violence in particular, 1 in 3 women globally have experienced sexual violence. But we don't know necessarily about how many folks who have perpetrated that violence. What we do know is that the bodies that perpetrate violence are predominantly male-identifying bodies. But the reality is we're not having conversations about how many bodies are perpetrating that violence. And so if we don't even know how many bodies are perpetrating that violence, how do we know how to stop it and prevent it? But some of the conversations that we can begin to have are as simple as disrupting sexist jokes, as simple as disrupting misogyny, thinking about what questions we ask when someone experiences sexual violence, thinking about where the onus goes when someone experiences sexual violence. So there's things that we can do in our personal relationships, there's things that we can do within the community, but then there's definitely things that we need to do as a society to begin to tackle this issue, to address this issue. And November 1st, so Friday, is the start of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And then November 25th, at the end of the month, begins the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And so we have these national awareness months, we have these strategies for activism, and yet we often don't know how to stop folks from engaging in the violence.
It's interesting because you said we need to understand more about the perpetrators so we can move forward, but also that we do understand that that most are men, male identifying. It would be easy, sorry, I shouldn't say easy, but some people would right away almost say, well, more men and boys need to talk about this, done. Toxic masculinity is the issue, done. But there's a lot of people out there that would say, well, I'm a man or I'm a boy and I want to be part of creating the change. You know what I mean? How do we make this, how do we involve people who want to be part of creating the change? Men that want to be part of creating the change. Are their voices missing in this?
I think I've seen a rise in those conversations through TikTok and the internet where folks are beginning to engage in like satire videos. And I do a lot of hiking, and so I get a lot of hiking content on my social media. That's what my algorithm thinks that I like, and they're not wrong. But I get a lot of videos about how men present themselves on hikes and how they can make themselves less threatening on hikes. So they, I have a dog, or I voted for Kamala, or, engaging in these different kinds of conversations to make themselves look less threatening. And so it's satire, but also it's a part of the reality is that there are ways that folks can present themselves in spaces that begin to make themselves look less threatening, or have others around them experience themselves as less threatening. And so I think for folks who want to be a part of that conversation, I think it begins with having conversations about toxic masculinity. It begins with having conversations with people in their life about, how do I do this better? How have I affected you? I don't think it should come from male identifying bodies. I do think that they should be listening to the women and girls in their lives about how they can be a better support to them. But I think then they can carry that on to other men, boys in their lives and be like, hey, I was having this conversation with my sister. I was having this conversation with my auntie, and share that knowledge within their groups so that we can begin to create this ripple effect.
And I also hope that people lean into that ripple effect, because it would also be easy to dismiss and, look at, even we started by talking about the incident at U of M, to say, well, what does telling a joke have to do with that? But you're talking about a continuum and systemic change and changing how we view this. And this has been, almost somehow that spectrum has been normalized for so long. Why do you think the onus for prevention itself has been focused on women for so long?
Well, we live in a patriarchal society, and so, the bodies of men, the voices of men, the power of men is privileged over and over and over again within the systems. It's literally the way that our society is structured. And so if we are enacting control and power over bodies, it makes sense to enact power and control over bodies that are already marginalized, that are already oppressed, that are already seen as less than. So it's easier as a society to engage in that expectation of women's bodies, of women's behaviors, because we already do that on a regular basis as a society. We already have differential expectations of women and girls.
How much of an issue do we have with holding perpetrators accountable for their actions when something happens?
I think that's a really challenging question. I think it depends on your definition of accountable, because I think just like with the spectrum of violence, the spectrum of gender-based violence, the spectrum of accountability changes. And I think as well, one of the things that can be really challenging in being someone who has experienced violence is that often control and power is further taken away from you when you engage in seeking care, in seeking support. And so accountability as defined by the criminal justice system may be very different than what I want as someone who may have experienced violence. It may be very different than, someone else who has experienced sexual violence. So I think there needs to be more space for the person who experienced the violence to define what accountability is, so that they are not further re-traumatized, further harmed through these processes where, again, control is taken away from them.
When you run workshops like on sexual violence or gender-based violence, what are some of the most common questions that you hear from people?
So we have a variety of workshops and, group counseling sessions as well. And so I think a lot of the questions that we get, particularly regarding sexual violence, are around, what do I do if someone tells me that they've experienced sexual violence? There's a lot of fear in receiving that question or receiving that information. And so folks want to know how to respond. Folks want to know how to help. And I think one of the, not that you asked, but I'm going to answer the question. But I think one of the realities is that folks want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want to be believed. They get to define what kind of support they need. So we don't always have to have the answers when that information is shared with us, but we need to sit and listen and believe them and support them. And so if someone is coming to you with a disclosure of sexual violence, with an experience of gender-based violence, there's space for you to sit and listen. There's also space for you to say, I don't know what to say. But I believe you. Let's go through this together. Let's seek out to someone who does know what to say.
Thank you very much for covering a topic that obviously has, personal elements and, grassroots elements, but then also those big systemic changes that we're going to need to see to move the needle on this. Appreciate having you here.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
That's Rochelle Reddy, the manager of crisis services at Clinic.
Breaking this hour,
CBC News brings you all the local, national, and international news you need to make sense of your world.
I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement.
Now's your chance to enjoy a free preview of Canada's source for breaking and live news.
The air raid sirens went off.
Find out why more Canadians choose CBC News Network over any other Canadian news channel. The CBC News Network free preview, on now.
There's one in Ontario named after a shoemaker. In Pennsylvania, you can visit a chocolate-sounding one. The English have one that's soapy. And in Japan, there's a whole big city named after a compact car. From Ottawa to Port Sunlight, company towns on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
Well, we are just 1 week away now from Americans heading to the polls in what many are saying is the most important election in that country's history. Coming up on the call-in conversation on noon today between 12:30 and 1, we are wondering what's top of mind for you here in Manitoba in these final days leading up to the U.S. election. So the guest is Marco Villotti, who is... I hope I'm saying the name correct, Villotti, who's editor-in-chief of iPolitics, who will be navigating the conversation. But the question for you is, what is top of mind for you as you're a week away? We're a week away now from the U.S. election. So through a Manitoba perspective, between 12:30 and 1, you can join that conversation live, or you can call now, which is why we talk about it now. And that is 788-3797. You can leave a message and get your voice in the conversation that way. Well, yesterday, Premier Wab Kinew shared plans to move ahead in a public inquiry into the Winnipeg Police Headquarters. The City of Winnipeg has been calling for this since it was determined that the former Winnipeg Chief Administrative Officer, Phil Schiegel, accepted a bribe from the building's main contractor. CBC's Ian Fraze and other reporters questioned the Premier about the public inquiry plans.
We're moving ahead with the police headquarters inquiry. Right now, we are considering who the lead commissioner would be. And we've also got a draft terms of reference, which will set out what we're considering under this inquiry, and also set out a timeline and a budget. And so those projects are in development, I would say, and once they're finalized, we look forward to sharing that with everyone in Manitoba, because really, I think there's a really important public need for us to understand what went wrong here, what mistakes are made, and most importantly, to look ahead to the future. How can we prevent something like that, or some of these situations that have been described in the media and in court? How can we avoid repeating those in the future? First and foremost, we start with what is the public good that we're trying to focus on here. And really, at the end of the day, is we just want the average Manitoban to have confidence that when these big public construction projects are being pursued, that things are going to be dealt with in an above-board fashion. It's about trust, it's about good governance, and it's about fiscal responsibility as well too. So for us, in terms of setting out the terms of reference, we're trying to design the scope and the mission of this inquiry to capture that. But that's also why choosing the right commissioner to lead it is so important, because we'll set the timeline, we'll set the scope to a certain degree, as well as a budget, but it really will be that commissioner who is going to, over the course of the inquiry, ensure that we hit the goal of what we're trying to accomplish here while staying within the parameters of timeline and budget. So we're setting up the terms of reference, which are in draft form right now, and then giving a lot of consideration to who the right commissioner would be, so that we can deliver to Manitobans that greater sense of confidence.
Is it going to be limited to the one project of the police headquarters, or will the terms of reference include other projects?
So what I would say is, what we want to look at here does have to do with the police headquarters in particular. But as we think about the future and the recommendations here, we want to ensure that because the legislative framework around the City of Winnipeg and municipalities in Manitoba has changed since this time, that we're keeping the recommendations focused on what we could do to prevent a situation or situations like these from occurring again in the future.
But it sounds like you're only planning to look back at the police headquarters, and then looking forward, it's much broader.
I think that's right. Yeah. So recommendations would be like, given the current legislative framework that exists in Manitoba today, how do we ensure Manitobans have confidence that your money is going to be invested in big public projects in the right kind of way? But in terms of what is going to be considered to deliver those recommendations, we'll be looking at the police headquarters.
Do you have to wait until after all the civil litigation or lawsuits are over before you can do anything, or announce terms of reference or commissioner and get going on this?
Well, I think that from our perspective, we're in a position to move ahead. We have been taking the time to make sure that the terms of reference are strong and solid, and that more has to do with ensuring that we're getting the scope right and reflecting the current reality that the City of Winnipeg and municipalities have to operate under right now.
So that is the voice of Premier Wab Kinew speaking actually yesterday at a press conference, giving more detail to the plans to move ahead in a public inquiry into the Winnipeg Police Headquarters, which has been something that the City of Winnipeg's been calling on for some years. We're coming up to news time here. I'll just mention, if you have any updates in traffic, you can still call us 788-3093 as we get through the rush of our commute this morning. But right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is 5 degrees, mix of sun and clouds to start your day, and then more clouds moving in. A high today of 9. Winnipeg police confirm they are investigating after large Stars of David were drawn on the sidewalk outside the food fair on Portage Avenue near Arlington. Co-owner Ramsey Zeed says it happened somewhere between morning and noon on Sunday. He says more than a dozen stars were drawn on the sidewalk in front of the store. Zeed, who is also president of the Canadian Palestinian Association of Manitoba, calls it a hate crime.
It's disgusting. I mean, I don't know why somebody would do that. I don't know why people would draw Stars of David in front of our stores. I mean, I know why. I mean, they're trying to intimidate and silence us.
Zeed says store security video shows a man and woman using chalk to draw the stars. Winnipeg police say they are investigating, and the hate crimes coordinator has been notified. People in the PAW are being asked to turn on their outdoor lights and make sure their doors and windows are locked this morning. 2 inmates escaped from the Paul Correctional Centre last night. RCMP, using police dog services, a drone, and with the help from Manitoba First Nation Police Services, arrested 1 inmate around 8:30 last night. But another is still out there. 29-year-old Brandon Anderson is from Nelson House. He is described as 6 feet tall, 170 pounds. You can see his photo on our website this morning. Police say he has a history of weapons offenses and is considered dangerous. RCMP also asked people in the PAW to be vigilant and to stay indoors and to call 911 if they see anything suspicious. The Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service is working on changes to how it dispatches first responders. Ryan Sneath is Deputy Chief of Paramedic Operations and Training. He says right now calls fall under 2 categories. Priority 1, lights and sirens, or Priority 2, sirens but no lights. They are, however, in the process of shifting to a new 5-category system.
Timeliness to critical emergencies. So we recognize extending times getting to critical emergencies just because of the sheer volume of calls. And so we knew we needed to address that. We knew we needed to make sure that we had paramedics arriving at emergencies that required time-dependent care.
Sneath says the new system will likely roll out early next year. He says Priority 1, time-dependent calls, won't see a change. The rest will fit into the other 4 categories. Manitoba's opposition PC say a bill that would restrict machete sales unfairly targets retailers. The NDP tabled the bill earlier this month after a number of violent attacks. It would restrict the sale of machetes and other long-bladed weapons to people over the age of 18. But PC Justice critic Wayne Balkin says the province should also go after people who possess machetes for unlawful use.
They could put a prohibition for somebody to carry them if there's no recourse or legal recourse for somebody to be having them with them. So that would give police and peace officers the justification to then seize these weapons, if nothing else, and get them off the street.
If passed, the bill would require retailers to keep machetes away from public access and keep records of sales for at least 2 years. A new Heritage Minute is being released today. The new one honors Mary Ryder Hamilton. She was a Canadian painter who documented the aftermath of the First World War. But she was initially denied a job as a war artist because she was a woman. The Heritage Minutes, which feature 60-second videos, are produced by Historica Canada. And it was a good run.
Connor scores! He's got two.
Kyle Connor in the second period on Prime last night in front of the Jets' first sellout crowd of the season. It was also the first loss of the season. The Jets falling 6-4 to the Leafs. Connor Hellebuck stopping 30 shots. Coach Scott Arniel says his team wasn't ready to go the way Toronto was.
Toronto was a heck of a lot better than we were. They wanted it, and they came in here and gave us a punch right in the nose.
So Winnipeg's winning streak this season, early this season, ends at 8. There will be more. Right now, it's back on the road. Winnipeg is in Detroit tomorrow night. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah.
Heather Wells and Chris Armstrong. And you can catch us in our news department this morning. Big thanks to our live team, May McKillop, as well as Kevin Ipatebo and Abby Adiyemi. Thanks to our associate producers in unit and our leaders in unit, who are Leif Larson and Nellie Gonzalez. Before we check weather traffic one more time, let's throw up a few more last pictures for those of you that follow the show on YouTube. These are Halloween costumes to inspire you if you don't have yours organized yet. Here's Brenda Beck saying this year's costume, peace. And she's full on 70s mode. She's got a psychedelic outfit on there with the purples and the blues, and it looks like a kaleidoscope with a floppy hat. Very cool. And I love this one. This is Jennifer Dumore saying, my husband and I love Halloween. She wrote to CBC. We've had many costumes, but this is one of my favorites. We're canoeists. So she says the front and back half are separate, but it was still a challenge getting through a crowded house. And what we're looking at is them standing together. It looks like they're in one canoe. But how smart is that? They're each wearing kind of a half canoe around their waist that was created, and they're carrying paddles and wearing life jackets. So that is so fun and creative and simple, right? You could do this. That's a good last minute or two. Thanks for the ideas. All right, let's get into a final look at what's happening in traffic as we wrap the show.
Absolutely. Just a quick update about a collision on westbound Abinogi-Mikina between St. Mary's Road and River Road. We got a call updating that the emergency crews are still blocking the center lane, but traffic is starting to move around that center lane. Thank you to everyone who called our show today.
All right, thanks, May. And Abby.
Across board, we're going to see a mix of sun and clouds in the south, while the north remains mostly cloudy with that chance of flurries and light snow. It's going to be chilly up there. We're going to see highs reaching 11 down south and 2 further north. Winnipeg, 5, and by mid-morning, that cloud cover will come our way. We'll warm up to 9.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Take care, be well, everyone, and thanks again for spending some time with us this Tuesday morning. We're back again tomorrow with another edition of Information Radio on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. The Current's next.